Yes.
The lead spring army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1312 of the War News stream. And today we have very big news that Russia suffered a major submarine accident today near Spain, forcing it to surface. We've also heard that the Zaporizhzhia nuclear crisis has begun today after a power outage for the fourth day, and also a drone nearly collided with a NATO plane today at an airport in Amsterdam. It's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to get significant developments primarily from Europe and the Middle East over the course of the day. Primarily, and most importantly, we have been able to hear that a Russian Kilo Class Submarine, the Novorossiysk, has suffered a critical failure near to the Strait of Gibraltar, forcing the submarine to surface and call on Russian assistance. From what we understand, some sort of a fuel line has ruptured inside of the submarine under unknown circumstances, which has led to a significant part of the crew compartments being filled with gas and the vapors possibly leading to an explosion inside the submarine. While I almost choked on my own spit right there. Quite an interesting sort of a development as well. The submarine will be towed apparently back to Russia by a Russian tugboat, which is within the area, but it is once again showing off the lack of naval prowess of the Russian Federation's naval forces, and also the aging and ailing condition of their submarines like the Kilo class, which is currently stuck right now at this very moment around the Strait of Gibraltar. Meanwhile, inside of Ukraine, we have been able to hear of a very concerning impending nuclear incident that is ongoing at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. According to information that we've been able to get today, it has been said that the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has now been cut off of external power for several days, and at this moment has been running on emergency power for the past 4 days. It is expected that these generators will only be able to operate for about another 16 days before they shut off, stopping the flow of coolant through the reactors and leading to a meltdown of all active reactors at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. This situation is incredibly significant, And while the Russian Federation is working as fast as possible to be able to restore connection to the power grid for the power plant to make sure that it continues to operate safely, it is seeming to be a little bit of a taller task than expected than the Russians were hoping for. While that's all been going on, the Russian Federation told us at the United Nations today through their foreign minister, Sergai Lavorov, that there is absolutely nothing to be concerned about, and Russia has nothing but the best interests and wishes for the rest of the world, especially the United States and NATO. Although they've been openly saying for years that they want to kill all of us, and they consider the Russian Federation to be in a state of war with the West, and over just the past few days have clearly stated that they consider themselves to be in a de facto state of war with the United States of America and the greater NATO alliance, all of that seems to have just been exaggeration and hype up, and clearly Vladimir Putin and the entirety of the Russian government has not made any such statements as those. At the same time, in the very same speech that Lavrov made, he also threatened the entirety of the West that any actions against Russian aircraft, whether they be manned or unmanned, whether they be flying inside of Russian airspace or generally not, if they are shot down, Russia will go to war and start killing everyone in the West, which is what he just said right before that in the speech the Russian Federation wouldn't do. Outside of that, the Russian Federation appears to have been, if we are alleging that all drone incursions in Europe are Russian right now, flying a massive drones throughout the entirety of Northern Europe today, with drone spottings being seen inside of Finland, Norway, as well as Amsterdam today, nearly leading to a crash with an airliner that was taking off from the Amsterdam International Airport. The Germans are also talking about passing a law to try and shoot down these incoming drones here in the near future, while Denmark is now deploying anti-drone radars around major airports to be able to try and detect these drones when they come into the country again. The United States is moving an early bird-class destroyer into the area, while NATO is also going to be designating an anti-air frigate to also patrol the Baltic as well. Drone fragments were found near to the Gulf of Riga on the southern Estonian border, and we also saw that some Abrams were being transported through Estonia today. Although it's a little bit unclear as to what national force that is attached to, it is believed to be a part of the United States Army. We have also seen that Raising Cane is currently on a flight back from Latvia to the United States of America after having a meeting with the representatives of all 32 NATO nations, at least their armed forces for that matter. In the meantime, the Ukrainian armed forces have been holding their ground inside of the state of Ukraine, inflicting significant casualties on the Russian Federation today and generally stopping any advance by Russian forces. Inside of the Middle East, the Islamic Republic of Iran has stated that they are going to be now removing their ambassadors from multiple European nations, and they also appear to be given an interesting demand by the United States of America, while a future strike by the Israelis against Iran appears to be coming here soon, most likely within the next several months. We have massive and significant news to share with each and every single one of y'all throughout the course of the night, and we're going to be making sure to get into all of the details of everything we have, all of these massive stories, and all the stories that I did not tell you all about yet, but we will be getting through the course of the stream. And of course, we're going to be starting with our biggest ones first, and then working our way down into the smaller stories throughout the course of the news. But moving on into our first and most important piece of news for the day, we have been able to hear of what can only be described as the mini Kursk 2.0 off the coast of Spain. I guess you could say that the Russians are living in Spain without the S. Basically, they're living in pain. And at least the sailors on board this Kilo Class Submarine are certainly living in a great deal of pain. We have been able to hear that their submarine has suffered a significant failure today. That is the actual picture of this submarine that is just sitting around the Strait of Gibraltar right now. From what we understand, this Russian Kilo Class submarine is the Novorossiysk, which is named after the Russian town of Novorossiysk, which just got blown up the other day by a whole bunch of Ukrainian drones. Kind of a little unfortunate naming, and it seems to have really caught up to the submarine. The submarine, from what we understand, has had a significant accident occur on board, either due to going too deep, which is highly unlikely considering that any sort of depth by the Russians, both philosophically and literally, is quite impossible. This fuel line may have ruptured inside the ship, or it could have just been due to a lack of maintenance or poor construction. We're not really sure which one of the three it is, but it does appear that at least today, it came out that the Novorossiysk has had a major fuel rupture inside the ship, and fuel is starting to flood directly into the compartments of the submarine that are used by the crew. So right now, the submarine isn't flooding with water, it's flooding with its own blood, the gasoline or diesel that keeps this submarine running at sea. It had to conduct an emergency surfacing near to the Strait of Gibraltar and immediately started squawking emergency signals, stating that it needs assistance reports from another Russian ship within the area. Someone in Spain kindly took a picture of it from the coastline, and we can see that it looks like a ghost ship out there, which is also a little bit prophetic, considering that this thing most likely will end up like one, considering how bad of a disaster this is today. And we also got to hear that a Russian tug did respond. This is the Russian tug Yakov Grabelsky, which arrived on scene to try and help out this Russian submarine in its dire hour of need. We always know that the
How the hell did it get there so quick? Like, Russia's not exactly what you call close to this area, so how'd the Russian tug, what did they, like, hightail it here or something?
Well, that's a great question, Matthew, and this leads me to one of the greatest things about the Russian Navy. Because the Russian Navy is so bad off, and they don't tell anyone this publicly, folks, but the Russian Navy is very much bad off. Any one of their ships can suffer a critical failure or breakdown and require assistance practically immediately. Because of that, the Russian Federation is one of the few navies in the world that actually keeps a tugboat within a general area of operations of the Russian Navy, so that way if any of the ships happen to break down, a tugboat is already on site, like roadside assistance, to be able to hook up to that ship and start dragging it away. That's literally what they do.
Honestly, I would say that's not a good thing, because if you have to have a tugboat nearby at all times, pretty much even during normal operation, that's not a bragging point. Like, oh, we're prepared. We go into a battle prepared for everything. It's like, that's actually pretty bad. Like, I thought the whole point of a submarine was to be completely undetectable, but I guess you can track the sub based on where the tugboat's at, the rescue ship.
Man, they got some guy up here with a corncob pipe going, "Yar, the seas be brutal," like while they're following around the sub. Man, honestly, it's a joke. Like 100%, it's an absolute joke. Also, by the way, I have to add this in, folks, just to add a little bit more comedy to this. Because the diesel is starting to flood the crew compartments of the submarine, what happens whenever any sort of fuel enters an atmosphere that's not inside of a contained tank? Even in a contained tank, this happens. But this is now the risk that's going on inside of the sub. The diesel is emitting vapors, what the French would call essence. And this is filling every single part of the sub. Essence, or as we would actually call it, vapors, are incredibly flammable and combustible. A single spark can set off gas or diesel vapors and pretty much ignite the entire interior of the submarine instantaneously in a fuel-fueled explosion that would pretty much destroy the submarine from the inside out. So right now, from what we know, the hatch, as you can see right there on the sail, is wide open because they're trying to vent out all of that, as the French would say, essence, into the greater atmosphere outside the sub, so that way the whole thing doesn't happen to blow up because someone tries to light a cigarette in the engine room and then sends the whole thing to heaven, or hell, generally, which is where we assume they go.
Can you imagine the Spanish? And also, this is off the coast of Gibraltar, by the way, so it's technically not really Spain, it's more Gibraltar. But nonetheless, the Spanish responded to this whole incident by sending out their surveillance aircraft. Can you imagine their reaction when they saw this thing come up? Like, they were probably like, oh my God, look, there's a Russian sub right here in the Strait of Gibraltar. It's right there. And then they obviously sent down all their aircraft to go circle the thing. So that's kind of crazy, actually. I'm sure they weren't expecting that, because obviously the thing wants to stay stealth. But when you have a gas leak happening in your hull, you got to come up for air. Otherwise, everybody on board could suffocate, or, one single spark could send the whole thing blasting. It could be that bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really crazy sort of thing. The sub was about right here, where my mouse cursor is at on screen. And just to explain this really quickly to everyone, it's very close to the Strait of Gibraltar. I mean, in this angle here, you can literally see the Rock of Gibraltar in the background, in the back part of this picture. The reason why all of this happens so close, and it's not technically inside of Spanish waters, is because there's actually an international water corridor here in the Strait of Gibraltar. And from what we're assuming, the submarine was either about to pass through that, or had just gotten done passing through the Strait of Gibraltar in that international water corridor, and then had the near fatal incident, and then surfaced, pretty much emergency surfaced in the middle of the international waters within this international strait. So technically it's not in Spanish or British waters, because also some of y'all who are incredibly keen will know that Gibraltar, or at least this really small sliver of it beyond this line right here, which I'll show you a little bit there more clearly, that dashed line, everything south of that is actually a British overseas territory. It's not in British or Spanish waters at the moment. It's pretty much in international waters, but very close to Gibraltar. But I've got to be honest with y'all, this is one of the incidents that lets you know the Russians can't be that well off. Could y'all imagine a U.S. nuclear submarine, or any of our submarines for that matter, surfacing in the modern day because it had a fuel line rupture? No, no one could ever imagine that. No one could ever imagine that the U.S. Navy would have to have tugboats literally wandering around near fleet operations because the chances of a significant or critical breakdown is so high that they might as well just have a tug on scene waiting for it to happen. This really shows y'all how bad off the Russian Navy truly is, because for one of their newer Kilo Class diesel-electric submarines to have this critical of a failure is pretty shocking. On top of that, what's even crazier is that apparently the damage control teams weren't able to stop the flood of diesel into the crew compartments, and it pretty much just emptied out the entire fuel tank into the sub. From what we know, it sounds as though a massive amount of fuel has poured into the internal compartments of the submarine. So this is just absolutely insane in every way. Just the incompetence of it, the poor maintenance, the poor construction, the lack of damage control teams or effective damage control, everything all together. It's just insane to see. And it
And
generally is.
also, by the way, I see people pointing this out, and I do want to make a correction real quick. Diesel is not highly flammable like gasoline. It's not the same thing. Diesel can ignite, though. Like, I want to make that clear. It can ignite, but it either has to be under compression or it has to be under high temperatures for a sustained period of time. So it's still combustible. Like, I want to make that clear. Some people are saying that diesel can't ignite whatsoever. It can, but it takes a lot of high temperatures to do that. My question is this. We didn't get this piece of detail earlier today, but where was the diesel leaking from? Because I don't think it was leaking from the fuel tank. It sounded like maybe it was leaking from the engine, which would suggest it was probably under high temperature or something of that nature. I don't think we know that question or the answer to that question yet.
Generally, from what I understand, the fuel tanks of these sorts of submarines, or this class of submarine, are actually contained within the pressure vessel. Well, not actually the pressure vessel, but the outer skin of the pressure vessel as a part of its double hull, layered hull. So this may have actually been some sort of a rupture in one of the pipes feeding the diesel engines, which is why I was saying the lack of damage control teams stopping this is shocking, because generally on most submarines, there are pipe or valve cutoffs at pretty much every single section, every few yards on every single sub to be able to stop something like this from happening and getting out of hand. Or there was a rupture within the hull in the actual pressure vessel, which led to the fuel pouring literally right out of the tank and right into the sub. We're not really sure which it is, but either one does not sound that good.
Yeah, it doesn't sound good at all, honestly. And also the fact that you can't breathe these fumes in. Like, these fumes from diesel are toxic. And when you're in a confined space like a submarine, those fumes will propagate within the entire submarine. So I'm not sure if they have a way to shut off certain sections of the submarine. I'm not sure if that's possible or not in a Russian sub, but that seems like a huge risk as well. Not that the Russians would care if their soldiers are breathing in diesel fumes, but obviously that's pretty bad. That's probably one of the main reasons they probably surfaced quick, was to get breathable air into that submarine.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy sort of a thing. And a lot like the Chinese with their submarine, where they opened up a hatch in the Yangtze River and ended up sinking their own sub and killing a couple of people. This might have ended up killing a couple of people today. We just don't know yet. The Russians will keep that very much hidden if that's the case. If this submarine was at an extreme depth, and this is one of the things that I'm thinking, folks, as a plausible theory, is that this submarine may have attempted a dive at an extreme depth somewhere in the area, which is what led to a fuel line rupture due to the stress or pressure on the hull and the fact that it may have been exceeding its test depth. And as a result of that, generally that would cause a rapid like a implosion for the larger part and pretty much just kill everyone. But it could rupture a fuel line like this. And once that fuel line ruptured, the vapor started to fill the compartments as well as some diesel within a specific area, and they may have closed some watertight doors and contained that area, and some people may have just suffocated on the fumes while they were attempting to surface. Especially if they were coming from a really deep depth, it could take a little bit of a while to surface, even if an emergency blowing of the tanks was conducted and they did an uncontrolled ascent to the surface. It still may be too long to get those people out of the vapors, and they may have actually suffocated on them. We're not really sure on any of this, though. Rather than the submarine having a critical emergency with some sort of a fuel line or a fuel rupture of some sort that's flooding crew compartments, the rest of this is pretty much just solid conjecture at this point.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
And also, it seems as though a lot of people are talking at this moment about this submarine accident, because this is about the biggest or closest sort of a Kursk 2.0 that we've had, at least here within recent years. The Russians always have failures, but this is one that's fairly interesting, at least for the prior years. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this situation, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So the big question is, will this be a true disaster for the Russians? Because right now it's merely an accident. It looks like they've generally avoided any severe consequences of the submarine having a major malfunction where apparently diesel got into the actual submarine compartment itself. So what's going to happen? It looks like 39% said Russia will probably botch the rescue and something could happen with the submarine even further than now, while 26% said no, Russia has rescued it successfully for right now. 26% said that. And 24% said it seems like a 50-50 chance. And honestly, I would say the big part of the danger is probably over right now. They have gotten the submarine to the surface and they have a tugboat helping to take the thing in. So it looks like it'll probably make it from here, but I'm really questioning what is going to happen to the crew of the submarine because I believe they're still in that thing. So while the thing's getting towed back to Russia or wherever it's getting towed to, this thing is going to have its crew inside of it, based on what I'm hearing right now. So unless they're planning on offloading a lot of the crew, then I think they're going to be stuck in there sleeping in the diesel vapors, based on what I know. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would have to say, I think there is, I would actually have to go with the 24%. I think that there's a 50-50 chance they could still botch this in the meantime because putting a submarine under tow like this, and considering that they may not be able to run the engines any longer because they may be bathing in a diesel fuel soup at this point in the engine or the machinery spaces, that may lead to them having to tug this thing all the way back to Russia. And if any of the tow cables break, this thing's just going to go adrift, and they're going to have to try and reconnect to it. And then a whole bunch of people could die from the vapors because I'm assuming that they're not going to take a lot of them onto the tug. It's not really like it's made for that. I really do not know when the world could go wrong. There's a million different things that actually could go wrong at this point. But we would have to wait and see what is going to happen. It could end up successful. The Russians are well experienced at vessel recovery at this point. One of the few things the Russian Navy actually does somewhat decently. But we will be trying to see whether or not this does end up in disaster. I'm actually thinking it's a 50-50 chance for the larger part. I actually do see some people talking about some sort of an ongoing development, at least at the moment. And we're going to try and look into that while we're here on air, because that actually may be a breaking development that's happening right now. But generally, just to explain this really quickly, Poland scrambling jets, at least right now, is not a major issue. We did see them scramble jets before with no drone incursions since the original drone incursion that happened recently. So it may not be the absolute breaking news, but it does sound as though we are getting developments on that at the moment. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so right now, as we're speaking at this moment, Russia is launching one of their largest air attacks of the war on Ukraine. And right now, hundreds of these one-way attack drones have been launched along with dozens of ballistic and cruise missiles by strategic bombers, MiG-31s, and the Black Sea Fleet. All these different assets of Russia are involved in launching this massive attack on Ukraine. And currently, millions of Ukrainians are sheltering. But the big news is we're also hearing that Poland has scrambled their F-16s to go on duty, and they're currently patrolling near the western area of Ukraine. So we're currently seeing a pretty typical Polish F-16 deployment. Nothing unusual about that. That is pretty much standard operating procedure at this point, considering that the drones have gone into Polish airspace before. This is pretty standard. So the big part is, though, Ukraine's getting hammered right now. Like, we don't have any video footage to show you, but apparently, based on what I'm hearing, it looks like Ukraine is taking a absolute walloping right now from pretty much every aspect of the Russian attack chain. So, Enforcer, what say you?
This sounds like an interesting development. We'll keep an eye on it throughout the course of the stream. Nightly drone attacks are pretty common. Pretty much every time we're on air at this point, there's an ongoing drone attack against the state of Ukraine. But the fact that the Polish are scrambling their air defenses is somewhat interesting, but it does not mean that there's going to be an airspace incursion tonight as a 100% guarantee. This is generally just a necessary precaution that's being taken by the Republic of Poland in response to the prior Russian drone incursion that happened, where the Polish were generally caught lacking for the greater deal and had to then immediately scramble everything and try and deal with the drone incursion, and really didn't deal with it much at all, if well. But anyways, moving on from that interesting development and that piece of news, we are also going to be moving on into Ukraine itself, as we have been able to hear of another significant development that has happened within the area of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. As many know, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is a place of historical interest, at least in the war, and has been one of the more important flashpoints, at least on the global diplomatic stage, between the Russian Federation and the state of Ukraine throughout the course of the war. The Russian Federation has operated the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant under Rosatom, which is the state-owned and operated nuclear power plant company inside the Russian Federation for years since the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant's occupation in the mid-part of 2022. We have also been able to hear recently that the Ukrainians have continued to state that the Russian Federation is grossly mismanaging the power plant and will most likely lead to some sort of a nuclear disaster that not only would affect the occupied areas of Ukraine, but also the unoccupied areas of the state of Ukraine and a greater part of Europe, including the Russian Federation. And crazily enough, folks, we actually do have enough credible information at this point to say that this risk is quite serious and one that is growing rapidly. We have been able to hear that over the course of this day, news has come out that the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has been disconnected from the power grid for 4 straight days. To quickly explain this to many, because nuclear power is something that generally a lot of people in the public don't know about and aren't told a lot about. There's just this sort of like knowledge in the public that nuclear power is green, it's glowing, and that it can turn you into an X-ray for the larger part. But nuclear power is something that is incredibly beneficial and also wildly clean and cheap to operate, especially for the amount of megawatt hours that you get out of it. One of the drawbacks, however, of a nuclear power plant is that for them to operate normally, they have to have a greater connection to the power grid at large. This allows for the power plant to be able to operate its coolant pumps. Coolant pumps are pretty much just a nice and elaborate term for a water pump. And the water pumps keep cool water flowing, pretty much room temperature water, through the reactor core, which is where all of the reactor rods, the control rods, the actual reaction rods, fuel rods is what they're called, so on and so forth, are actually conducting the reaction. This means that the power plant actually has to be connected to the greater power grid for those water pumps to work. If those water pumps turn off because of a lack of connection to the power grid, the emergency generators kick on. The emergency generators can keep the pumps running for about several weeks, about 2.5 to 3 weeks usually. Once those generators run out of fuel, or generally once those generators are no longer able to keep running continuously and the power plant is not connected to the main grid, what happens at that point is that there is no longer a flow of cool water through the core, and that will lead to skyrocketing temperatures, which will lead to the flash vaporization of the remaining water in the reactor as steam, which will then result in a nuclear meltdown. The core will also continue to heat at that point till the point that it melts itself, and it may get hot enough that it could actually breach the container or the boiling vessel and then make its way on through the concrete basements of the reactor. Actually, as a matter of fact, any nuclear meltdown, at least in this sort of a situation, would be wildly similar to the one at Chernobyl, just without the rapid acceleration that was created because of man-made errors in that sort of situation. At this point, the reactor has been without power from the main grid for 4 days, and the emergency pumps have been activated, and also the emergency reactors, which have continued to keep the cool water flowing through the core, at least for these 4 days. We are understanding there's only about 16 days left at this point, or about 20 days, for the generators to continue to operate the coolant systems before this turns into a meltdown. The Russians are feverishly working to reconnect the power plant to the main grid, but it appears that this is not as easy as it was originally anticipated. And the exact reasons why we are hearing that they're having a hard time reconnecting the power plant is a little bit tricky and generally unknown, at least on my end here on the channel. I haven't really been able to find a good reason why it's taking them so long to reconnect the power lines and to get the power plant reconnected to the power grid at large so that we can continue to operate its coolant pumps normally. This is, however, a very serious situation if the Russians do not get the main power grids connected to the power plant once again here, at least within the next 16 to 20 days. This reactor and this power plant, including all 6 of its reactors, may possibly go into some form of a nuclear meltdown, which could be similar to the Fukushima Daiichi disaster within Fukushima, Japan, or it may be similar to the Chernobyl nuclear disaster just north of here in the northern part of Ukraine in Chernobyl. It is a very precarious situation, and time is largely of the essence at this point. I don't want to overblow this and say that this is guaranteed guaranteed going to turn into a nuclear meltdown and an absolute unmitigated disaster. That would generally be fear-mongering. But one thing is for certain, the Russians are generally incompetent, and considering that there is pretty much an entire nuclear power plant in their hands at the moment, a lot of people are starting to say that they don't really have a lot of faith or confidence in the Russian Federation to be able to handle this nuclear power plant properly over the next few days, or generally weeks. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so this is a very, very big issue right here that could turn into a crisis in about 16 to 20 days if Russia can't properly fix this issue and reconnect the power plant to the power grid, because right now the pumps are not running on their own power. They're running on emergency power from the generators to keep that water flowing through the core. So what are your thoughts about that? And 37% said Russia will fail to fix the issue, while 32% said Russia might be intentionally doing this, and 21% said Russia will fix the issue in time. Now, a couple of things about Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant first. This is the largest nuclear power plant in Europe, and it's among the 10 largest nuclear power plants in the world. This thing is a monster, in other words. It produces a ton of power, and it's very, very large. So it's certainly something to take very serious with how large this one is. Also, another thing as well, most of the reactors at this plant are in what's known as a state of cold shutdown. They are not actively generating power. So that's an important aspect as well. But I did see people saying in the live chat, though, why don't the Russians simply shut down the power station and therefore stop a nuclear crisis? The problem is it really doesn't work like that, because even though this plant is not producing power, they still have to keep the fuel cooled down, because the fuel is still what's known as hot. It's still radioactive. So it's producing a radioactive emissions from it, which has to be cooled down by the cooling pumps, which take in the water from the Kakhovka reservoir and pump it right into the nuclear reactors themselves. So even though it's shut down, they still need to cool it. So you still need power for that. And the emergency generators only have about 20 days of emergency fuel, and it's already been 4 days. So by the quick math, it's about 16 days of emergency fuel left until there's a nuclear crisis. So right now, the Russians are basically playing against the clock right now, and we basically got to put our faith in the Russians that they know what they're doing enough to fix this, and that they're not doing it intentionally. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the situation is a very dangerous one at the moment, and I would have to say that I would have to be with the belief, with the 36%, the Russians may fail to fix this issue, considering that Rosatom is a fairly it doesn't really have the greatest safety record, at least from what we've heard, what's been alleged about their operations inside the Russian Federation. They don't really have the best record, and on top of that, this power plant has been openly stated by multiple agencies, including that of the IAEA, to be appearing to be mismanaged to some degree, generally to the point that it's been a great point of concern by the IAEA, and just recently, multiple IAEA officials came together and stated that the Rosatom company and the Russian Federation needs to relinquish the power plant back to the Ukrainians so that we can be operated nominally. And that's, of course, been ignored by the Russians. I would have to say that the situation is quite serious, and I would believe that the Russians may not be able to fix it, but we might be surprised. Hopefully we will be surprised, because this is nothing that we would want to see happen. This sort of a meltdown will result in a significant amount of radiological damage, not only at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant surrounding campus, but throughout the entirety of the state of Ukraine, the Russian Federation, and the whole of Europe. Especially considering that it's in the middle of a war zone, this also could lead to any sort of recovery or liquidation processes afterwards being incredibly difficult to conduct, considering that any sort of liquidation processes may be under fire the entire time that they're trying to conduct their actions. So, generally not the greatest thing, and I would have to say that it's a fairly concerning situation. Also, I see some people saying, well, can't the power plant use its own power to operate its pumps? Unfortunately, that's not how it works. I've tried to look into that before, and apparently that's just not how it works at all. Another interesting thing I've seen some people asking in the chat is why in the world is it that the reactors are off? And Matthew actually explained this pretty well. Why in the world is it that the reactors are off, but we still have to keep pumping the water through them? And Matthew actually explained that incredibly well, but I'll try and explain it in different ways since people are still asking the question. The reactor is off, which means that they are not making steam to run through a steam turbine to spin it to produce electricity. But The reaction, at least to some extent, is still ongoing inside of the reactor. All of the control rods have been inserted, but that does not stop the fuel rods from continuing to release their neutrons through the water and also bounce off of possibly other fuel rods before they're absorbed by a control rod. This means that there is still some heat being emitted by the core, and you can't let that water sit there forever, because if you sat it there forever and you didn't have water that was continuously being pumped through, even at a slower rate, the temperature will start to slowly rise until it gets to a flashing point where the water just starts to vaporize into steam. And considering that the power plant isn't even on and operating, that could start to pose some very considerable safety issues and also lead to a destabilization of the reactor due to void spaces being created where there is no water and there's only steam, which is pretty much just open air as far as we're concerned, because steam has a volume 1,500 times greater than that of solid state water. So with all that put together, that's the reason why water still has to keep flowing through the reactor even when they're technically shut off. And if you ever were paying attention a lot to the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, you would actually know that all of the other reactors at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant were still operational even after reactor number 4 had its critical meltdown, and water still had to keep being pumped through all of the other 3 operational reactors, I believe all the way up until the mid to late 2000s, as a matter of fact. I think one of the last ones was shut off in 2013 completely, and that's how long it took to actually deactivate the reactors entirely and render them no longer operational to any degree. So a similar thing would have to be done at the... go ahead.
Also, by the way, I'm not really sure. I think some people are misunderstanding something that we're explaining here. And also, by the way, I want to make it clear, I'm not a nuclear expert, so I'm open to hear like a nuclear expert's explanation of this and change my own opinion. But I've done some research into it, and I'm pretty certain that I have it right. Even though the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is of a different design than previously seen with the other power plant disasters that Russia has caused, this situation is still extremely dangerous, because I see some people saying, no, dude, that's not how it works. They've stopped the reaction, therefore there won't be a meltdown. But the problem is, like I mentioned, the fuel is still hot. It's still radioactive. So you have to cool that down. The whole point of a meltdown is the fuel overheats. It gets so hot that the fuel melts, and that therefore is a meltdown. And it causes a massive issue, and it sometimes can cause an explosion if it turns out to be bad enough. So we're looking at, from what I've gathered, a partial core meltdown. If this thing runs out of emergency fuel and they can't cool down the cores, then it might have a partial core melting down. But that's only after weeks. That would take weeks for it to get to that point, because since it is in a state of cold shutdown, the fuel rods are less hot than they would be if it was in active power generation mode. So that's the best way I can explain it. Once again, I'm not an expert, but that's the way I understand it based on the research I've done.
And I am an expert. I'm just kidding. We're not experts. Neither
Oh,
of us
damn.
are on this. I'm just kidding. I'm just playing around. I'm not an expert on this, but based off of all of the studying and listening and reading that I've done on how nuclear power plants work as a general operating theory, this is generally how they will work. And of course, there's huge differences between graphite-based reactors, light water reactors, boiling water vessels, boiling water reactors. This one, which is actually, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, a pressurized water reactor or a light pressurized water reactor. There are differences for the general point between all of those different reactor types and the finite specifics of how those reactors operate, but generally the running principles are the same, and for that reason, even though the reactors are shut off, that does not mean that you can just leave them and walk away. You still have to manage and operate this power plant for quite a long time and continue to keep pumping water through the core until the reaction completely stops, which takes an incredibly long amount of time. Chernobyl, which was I believe a graphite-based reactor, operated in a very similar principle, and really every single reactor on the planet operates in very similar principles to these. You cannot turn off a reactor like a diesel engine and shut it off and it's done, you can walk away. You pretty much have to keep babying and maintaining this thing for an incredibly long time, even after the reaction has technically, quote-unquote, stopped. There's still a reaction ongoing, it's just a much smaller one and still requires maintenance and oversight to make sure that it's fine. Basically, the best way to put it, folks, is that you put out the campfire, but there's still smoldering cinders inside of that campfire, and you've got to make sure that those don't float away and start a fire, or a forest fire or something. That's generally the same kind of principle there, and, much like in that sort of situation, you got to sit there and baby the fire even after it's technically technically been put out, because it can still cause a disaster, at least at that point. That's the best way I can make a analogy in a sense, and that's why right now, while the reactors are shut off, this can end up becoming a fairly considerable and serious sort of an issue. And that's also why many people are reporting on it, such as that. We're not the only ones. But moving on out of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and out of that general area, while the Russians are generally appearing to mismanage another nuclear power plant, and one of their submarines almost exploded today near Gibraltar due to a gas leak, we were able to hear very, very eloquent words put by Sergai Lavorov at the stables. I mean, the United Nations headquarters. It's just that whenever he's around, it just reminds me of the stables, you know? The equestrians. I actually do have to give you all an unfortunate announcement, however. We have been given a cease and desist letter by the American Equestrian Foundation, and they have stated that they have absolutely no affiliations with Sergai Lavrov or his breed of any type. And they want us to stop mentioning him as a horse, as they consider it insulting to all the horses of the United States and the world over. We're still going to call him Horseface, but we're going to make sure to keep that in mind and note that.
Also, that's a joke, by the way. I don't know if there's such thing as the whatever you call it, the United States Equestrian Society or whatever, but that's just a joke.
That is a joke. That is a joke. I'm just playing around, folks. But we were able to hear of some statements that were made by Lavrov today at the United Nations. One of these statements was this: Ukraine will not get its land back, and Moscow will not give up even the 2022 borders, according to Lavrov. At the same time, the Russian Foreign Ministry threatened NATO countries if they try to shoot down Russian flying objects in Russian airspace, they will, in quote, seriously regret it, once again threatening the complete outbreak of war. If y'all wanted to hear this in full detail, here's the clip. It was insanely quiet. So you can watch the clip if you want. Link in the description below. You can go to New York City and get this. I'm just going to read all the transcript, considering that the actual audio was so quiet that no matter what, I couldn't get it any louder than this.
Moreover, threats of the use of...
So, I mean, it's completely pointless to even play it. I can hardly hear it, so I know y'all certainly cannot hear it. So let me read the transcript off to y'all as to what Lavrov said at the United Nations, word for word. Russia is being accused of almost planning to attack the North Atlantic Alliance and the European Union countries. President Putin has repeatedly debunked these provocations. Russia has never had and does not have any such intentions. However, any aggression against my country will be met with a decisive response. I don't think I need to remind anyone here how vehemently Russia denied its plan to invade Ukraine before the full-scale war. That's an additional add-on by Anton Gerashchenko, and I would have to generally agree with him. This statement sounds just like the one that the Russians made before they invaded Ukraine. Didn't they say something like, Russia is being accused of almost planning to attack the state of Ukraine? President Putin has repeatedly debunked these provocations and has also insisted that no Russian forces have ever been in Ukraine or were involved in Ukraine during the 2014 annexation of Crimea and the Donbass crisis. Wasn't it a similar sort of a statement that was made by them at the United Nations during that time? Wasn't it? It was, actually. It was almost the same statement that they made back then. So it does appear that the horseface has made these statements. We can actually see him here, making his horse-like sounds. Apparently he was asking for hay and sugar cubes, which apparently the United Nations didn't have. They were too busy shutting off escalators the next hall over. But nevertheless, it does appear that he was out here and doing his horse-like actions, as we all know. It's a fairly sort of a common thing, as we all would imagine. Still, I would have to generally tell y'all that I do not believe these Russian lies that were said in the United Nations today, because the Russians do not have the best interest of NATO, the European Union, or anyone in mind for that matter. They want to kill us all. That's just the truth of it. If they can put us all in a grave, they would. And they are working on that at this moment right now. All of the drone provocations that are going on over there in Europe at this moment are quite clearly an act of war, or generally acts of war that are being conducted by the Russians. And we're actually getting news developments at this very moment of drone activity in Eastern Europe being conducted by the Russians right now. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so unfortunately, go ahead and pull up Flight Radar 24 because we need to check this out because apparently it's happening live right now. We are seeing that airspace near Lublin and Rzeszów in Poland has been closed until at least 0400 UTC due to unplanned military activity related to ensuring state security. That is code words for the Polish are worried that Russian drones are about to go into their territory. So that's what we're seeing right now. We're currently seeing a flight of MMF-19, which is a NATO tanker, flying around the area of eastern Poland. Poland. That's correct, eastern Poland. And right now we're seeing as well that aircraft is now circling in a pattern here around the city of, it appears to be maybe Reja, I believe. I'm not really sure. I can't really see it on the map that well, but we're currently seeing a NATO deployment. That's what I'm trying to say here.
Choice
And
Hotels
it looks like the
gets
Polish
you
are
more
taking
for
this
your money.
very seriously. Thank you, Choice Hotels. We appreciate you very much. I'll make sure to stay there next time. But in the meantime, though, we're staying at a Holiday Inn because right now NATO could be under attack yet again. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say, folks, that I'm going to have to get the Flight Radar Premium or whatever the hell it is, because we're starting to whip out Flight Radar, and that shit's annoying me. I'm just going to be straight up there about the stupid ads that keep popping up. But nevertheless, it does appear that there is an ongoing NATO air operation within southeastern Poland at the moment, and it appeared that the aircraft was conducting orbits near to the Polish city of Radom, which sounds a lot like radium. But nevertheless, that appears to be the incident that we're hearing of at the moment. It does not appear that there are any ongoing drone incursions into the area, but they've already preemptively shut down the airspace just in case if there is. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that and trying to make sure that we keep all of y'all apprised of the ongoing developments and news that we're getting out of that area, because it actually does appear that there may be a possible attempt by the Russians to conduct a drone incursion over the course of the next minutes or maybe the next hour or so. But moving on from that and on into Europe, speaking of the drone incursions that we were able to hear of throughout the course of the entire day today, we were able to hear that a drone was spotted over a dam within northern Finland, around this one right here in that picture. It's actually that one. I wish I could find it for y'all. I had it on the map earlier, and then I lost the marker, and then I went, you know what, forget it. I'm just not going to try and show it. But it is somewhere up here within this northern area, near to one of the larger lakes or reservoirs that you see around Rovaniemi, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Nevertheless, there were drones sighted around that area. Not only that, but drones were also sighted in Norway near to the area of the Orland Air Base inside of the region of Norway, central Norway, near to Trondheim. We actually did get to zoom in on this one earlier in the day, and we can actually see some interesting stuff around here. For example, all of these support facilities, and also, on top of that, some additional information. Helicopter pads, a decent bit of them. We can also see, in some other parts of the airbase as well, some hardened aircraft shelters where the aircraft are kept, and then most importantly, more open air aircraft containment areas. And it also appears that a small museum is being maintained here. That appears to be an F-84 Thunderjet and an F-86 Sabre. And then right down here, that appears to be an F-5 Tiger, I believe is what they're called. But still, we were able to hear of drones over this airbase, which is a military airbase of the nation of Norway, the Kingdom of Norway. And it does appear that that was another drone incursion that we were able to hear of over the course of the day. The biggest one that actually happened, at least from what we were able to report from the last 24 hours, was in Amsterdam, of all places. Many people have said that there are a lot of red flags going up because of this ongoing drone incursion throughout Europe, but in Amsterdam, they say that there's a lot of red lights going up because of this whole drone incursion going on across all of Europe, and specifically over the international airport at Amsterdam. We were able to hear that multiple pilots were reporting this drone incursion around the area, around the Amsterdam Schiphol airport earlier. Then we were able to hear that as those reports were being made, a drone came within 50 meters of colliding with a Transavia passenger jet that was about to land at the Schiphol airport in Amsterdam a few hours ago. And that is something that is quite concerning. If this drone was sizable and it ended up colliding with that aircraft, it could have led to a crash of the aircraft and a great deal of injuries or loss of life of the people that were on board that aircraft. This is an incredibly concerning development, and the drone incursions are getting worse. They are spreading over pretty much the entirety of Northern Europe today, and they're also threatening civil aviation with the threat of crashes by colliding with these drones because they're dangerously flying through closed and contained airspaces around international airports and military air bases. And a lot of people have been talking about this at the moment. And Matthew, what are you thinking about it? And what are people thinking about it as well?
All right, so the thing that people were fearing the most is apparently one of these drones that have been invading NATO airspace, at least according to what we know right now, nearly collided with a passenger jet airliner today in Amsterdam by just 50 meters, so extremely close to the airliner. And what are your thoughts about that? 61% said NATO will probably wait until losses end up happening to respond to it, while 19% said NATO will definitely respond after this incident, and 14% said NATO really can't stop this as it stands at the moment. So I would say this, like we were saying multiple times over the last week. NATO should respond to this quickly because they appear to be escalating this. Now it's getting close to passenger jets, and that was something right there that I wasn't really sure if they were going to actually try to do. And it looks like they flew it close to the airliner on purpose. It looks like it was not accidental. It was likely on purpose. So I would say, unfortunately, I think NATO is going to wait and basically remain in action, basically inaction, that is, until losses happen. That's not the way they should handle it, but I think that's the way NATO is going to handle it. If I were in charge personally, I would handle this proactively and go ahead and start shooting these unknown drones down over NATO airspace, so that way whoever's launching them learns a lesson, and also it does not endanger any future jets that are flying in NATO airspace. So, hopefully NATO gets their act together, because hopefully there's not an air accident before they end up responding to it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would just say that I think that NATO's going to wait around until people get killed from this. That's what I'm thinking as well. NATO is so inactive at this point and is lacking any kind of a real response that it seems as though they're pretty much just going to wait until folks get killed and then react to that. That is something that I think is an incredibly bad sort of a mindset to have, at least in this situation. We should be acting proactively at this point to shoot down these drones, no matter whose they are, and if they're the Russians, well, they can either complain about that, and they'll end up regretting that dearly, or they can just ignore it and decide not to fly drones through our airspace any longer and threaten people inside of our skies with death from these sorts of drones. Some people have been saying, and I also think that some people may be a little bit ignorant on this, that 50 meters is not an incredibly short distance. It's actually really far. It's 150 feet. I think you might not be understanding, but a commercial airliner, even at a slower speed on an approach to an airfield, is moving well over 100 feet a second for the larger part at those kinds of speeds. So with that in mind, that drone was less than a second away from hitting that aircraft when it was flying through the area. Generally, that's another way to look at it. So it is insanely close. I know 150 feet to someone may just not be that, maybe a good bit of ways or a decent distance away, because, you're imagining that you're having to stand there and walk towards the drone, but an aircraft isn't moving at walking speed, where 150 feet is a decent distance away from collision. An aircraft is moving at about 130 knots to 140 knots on a landing approach, sometimes up to 150. So these aircraft are still moving incredibly fast. And 150 feet of a clearance, or 50 meters, is not a long distance between that of the aircraft and that of the drone, especially if it was anywhere in front of the aircraft, which it could have been. So, once again, not an incredibly long distance sort of a call where, it's not that big of a deal. This is quite a big deal. Also considering that the standard safety protocol for aircraft that are airborne is to keep at least a 1,000-foot clearance in altitude above or below the plane, and to also keep aircraft several miles from each other, at least distance-wise. So anything being 50 meters from an aircraft is extremely dangerous. That is well beyond the minimum parameters for safety in every regard, both vertically and horizontally around the aircraft, and is a grave danger to any civilian aviation within the area. That's also why, if you ever pay attention, which some people may not, that's also why the federal government doesn't allow you to fly your drones, if you have one personally, over 200 feet, because then at that point, you could start killing a whole bunch of people, especially if they end up colliding with that drone and it gets sucked into a jet engine, or it gets directly hit into the propeller of a Cessna. You can end up causing some pretty significant damage and killing a couple of people. That's why here in America, the FAA doesn't let you fly your drones around wherever, because you can end up doing something like this and ending up getting a lot of people killed from your own stupidity. So, generally, this is quite concerning and quite dangerous. And I've got to say, folks, I don't mean to sound heated on this, but the one thing that really does get me a little heated is when some people who are too smart for their own good start saying stuff with no knowledge, like, being 150 feet away from an aircraft moving 140 knots isn't dangerous at all. That's a little bit crazy to me. And I'm like, how in the world can people be that ignorant to downplay stuff like this when if they knew anything about airspace regulations and safety, this is extremely dangerous. I mean, insanely dangerous. Like, a drone was spotted near Gatwick Airport not that long ago. Like, I think it was 2 miles away from Gatwick. They shut down the entire airspace of Gatwick for hours to get this drone out of the sky and go arrest the guy who was doing it, because he could have ended up getting loads of people killed, even flying at about 2 miles away from Gatwick. Like, just not knowing about safety and then saying something that's stupid and ill-informed, like a drone flying right over an airport 50 meters from a commercial airline is entirely safe and this is being overplayed, is absolutely ridiculous. Like, you would literally have to be
Yeah.
dumb and stupid to think that.
And also another thing as well is that people are assuming that the drone is under perfect control by whoever's piloting the thing. It could lose a signal to the control panel or whatever's controlling the drone. It could lose signal to it, and it could swerve off course all of a sudden and swerve right into a passenger jet. So, that's why it's insanely dangerous for any type of aircraft that is not being controlled by air traffic control to be in that controlled airspace at any point, because nobody knows what it's going to do. Also, nobody knows exactly if it's reliable or not. It could lose signal. So it's very dangerous. I don't understand why people are trying to write that off. It's super dangerous.
Yeah, don't y'all remember the 70 or so folks who got killed in Washington recently because an Army helicopter was flying, oh, I don't know, maybe 150 feet away from an incoming CRJ, and it ended up getting that a little bit wrong, and then they ended up colliding and getting everyone killed. Don't you remember that? I mean, that kind of gives you the knowledge there that being 150 feet or 50 meters away from any other flying aircraft within an airspace is insanely dangerous. Like, that is the best example that we have. It's one of the deadliest aviation incidents that we've had in the United States in recent decades since 9/11. And that was because a helicopter got very well close to a flying aircraft, and then nobody really, well, actually the air traffic controllers caught it well ahead in advance, but it appears that the pilot on board the helicopter really didn't catch the visual distance of the proper aircraft, and then it ended up colliding with them as a result. So quite clearly, being too close to a moving aircraft within the airspace of an airfield, or really for that matter, close to an aircraft in any airspace, whether you're close to an airfield or not, is insanely dangerous, especially at those sorts of distances. But with that, we are going to be moving on from that news out of the drone incursions today and moving on into some of NATO's response that we've been hearing of so far. But we also have some more developing information coming out about the Kilo Class Submarine, the Novorossiysk, which surfaced near Gibraltar today. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping back to that Russian submarine having a major malfunction near the Strait of Gibraltar, we have gotten some more news here. Schizo, who's a friend of the channel on Twitter, actually made a really good point that I did not notice until he mentioned it literally 5 minutes ago on Twitter. So, Enforcer, go pull up his post real quick. I just reposted it because you might remember we actually reported on this the other day. There was a cargo vessel that made a hard and sharp right turn right in the same general vicinity that the Russian submarine surfaced today near the Strait of Gibraltar. I'm beginning to wonder, like Schizo seems to be wondering as well, if that is related to the Russian submarine having a major issue. And once again, can we get a picture of that cargo ship, by the way, the Laga, I believe it's called, and see exactly what that ship looks like? There, is that it right there?
This is the, at least on its name here, it says it's the Ivan Sheletov, but I believe that may be the Laga.
Interesting. So it does appear to be a cargo vessel, so it could be completely unrelated to the submarine itself, but I wonder if this had anything to do whatsoever with that Russian submarine, because it seems a little bit odd that this thing right here made a sort of an unscheduled or at least an unplanned, based on what we're hearing, sharp right turn, which seems to be right near the Russian submarine and the area that it was having an issue near Gibraltar. So I wonder if it's related.
I wonder, actually. That is really interesting. We did report on that yesterday, and I think that we were both amiss to point out that singularity here, because we actually did report that yesterday, that a Russian fuel vessel had ended up going off course and brought its engines to a halt within a very similar area to where the Novorossiysk had its incident today. So that is quite interesting, actually. I wonder if those two things are correlated at all. Also, by the way, big shout out to Schizo. He actually posted something today, just like a side note. I had to react to this earlier today. He posted this. He went to the Conway Scenic Railway, and I'm a big fan of the Boston, Maine paint job, and he took some pictures of the F units, and I was like, dang, those look great. And he also took a ride on the Conway Scenic Railway, so I was like, that was really cool. Like, that was something I had to reply to on air. Well, not on air, but I had to reply to it on Twitter. It was pretty neat. But we do have more breaking news coming out about Poland in the meantime. But a big shout out to Schizo, who is also apparently a bit of a railroad enthusiast as well, much like I am. So, Matthew, what do we got on Poland at the moment?
All right. So apparently Poland has started to close multiple different airports. We were hearing that in addition to Lublin and Rzeszów airports in eastern Poland being closed, which are also, by the way, gateways for Western aid to Ukraine, we're also hearing that the Warsaw airport has also been closed allegedly as well. So it looks like these airport closures are spreading, and it's up to speculation right now why these airports are closing. It could be simply their defense plan is to close these airports in the event that they believe that Russian drones could go into their airspace, or it could be that they've spotted drones flying over these airports. Right now, we do not know that. That's currently up for speculation, but we are seeing that response by the Polish. And once again, the F-16s of the Polish Air Force are still in the air right now, in addition to multiple NATO tankers flying around the eastern part of Poland. So, Enforcer, what say you?
This is fairly interesting, and I believe that this may be showing that they're getting some sort of a plausibility that Russian drones may breach the airspace, maybe, because they're starting to close down a very significant area of Polish airspace in the southeast.
Yeah, it looks like it to me as well. Also, I'm seeing some people say right here, some people are saying that some other airports are closed in other countries like Norway. I have no information on that right now. I've not been able to verify that. So if that is happening, it hasn't caught up to me yet, and I haven't heard it from any of my sources. So I think right now it's pretty much limited to eastern Poland, I believe, and I believe that's going to be it for now. But if I see anybody else closing their airports, I'll let you know. But there's a massive NATO presence right now over eastern Poland. It seems to sort of coincide with the same incidents we saw when Poland got attacked the last time, and they actually had drone incursions into their airspace. So, it's kind of up for speculation.
Yeah, that's fairly interesting. We'll have to keep an eye on this, folks, and see what further developments we're getting out of this from the night. But this is a fairly interesting sort of a development that the Warsaw airport is now closed as well. Let me go and show you all that one, the Chopin airport, which is this one. I believe it's the Chopina or the Chopin airport, but this is their international airport. The Polish have actually requested that Google blur out every single airport on satellite because, crazily enough, the Russians actually use this a little bit. But this is the airport that apparently has also been closed as well. And as you can all see, this is the international airport for Warsaw. So the only airport into Warsaw that I know of has been shut down at this point as a part of the airspace closures. So right now it's Warsaw, Lublin, which is down here, which is, let me see here. Where in the world is this one? Where in the world? What in the hell? Wait, am I able to find this? Oh, here it is, right here. It's this one that's closed. This one isn't blurred out, funnily enough, but it's a fairly small airport. And then the
Oh,
Rzeszów airport.
Also, by the way, Enforcer, I'm looking here at Flight Radar 24. I'm trying to look at the airspace. I noticed something. It appears to be that Germany, eastern Germany near Berlin, it looks like their airspace has been cleared out. I have not gotten any official statement that their airspace has been closed, but there's currently only one aircraft. It appears to be a Chinese airliner flying through that area. There is pretty much no other aircraft in the entire eastern part of Germany right now, which is very unusual, and that is not normal. So, I'm trying to look here. You can probably hop on Flight Radar for a second to see this real quick. I'm sure the ad will start playing. You can probably try to mute that if you want, but you might want to take a look at this. This is pretty unusual looking to me. It looks almost identical to the eastern Polish airspace right now that's been closed, or at least generally cleared out. The eastern Germany almost looks identical to it right now. So that's very unusual.
Interesting. And actually, that does appear to be the case. There's also this one glider passing through. So I think you're wrong, Matthew. I think the airspace is open. I'm just kidding. A glider floating through doesn't mean anything. But there is a Sichuan Airlines Panda Route livery airplane that's currently flying through the area, along with a Air China flight 695, which is also passing over the area. Oh, that's interesting. The Chinese flying through German airspace? Why, I never thought I'd see the day. But they are, actually, quite interestingly enough. Is this an Air
Also, by
China
the
route?
way,
It is.
yeah, I think it might be. Also, by the way, I'm looking at the airspace of Sweden, Norway, etc. I'll be honest with you, folks. I'm not really sure. We haven't got any official statements, so take everything I say with a grain of salt right now. I'm simply making assumptions based on the ADS-B data from Flight Radar right now. But it looks like there's a very low frequency of flights right now over Norway as well. But I don't know how normal that is for Norway. I can say for Germany, though, that the German airspace in the eastern part of the country appears to be abnormal based on what I've seen before. But I can't make too many assumptions about Norway. I think they have a less frequency of flights than Germany has going to Berlin. But I don't know. It looks like something's going on.
Well, it's a little bit odd that the Oslo International Airport and the Stockholm International Airport wouldn't have any flights at least within the area. Everything's just kind of passing by. So that is a little bit interesting. Let's go look at what the United States is looking like right now to get a comparison. Yeah, there really isn't any empty spots in U.S. airspace, just to give you a little bit of a comparison. And considering that the United States of America has a smaller population density than Europe, and Norway and Sweden generally are more populous than most U.S. states, and this is what U.S. airspace is looking like at this time of night at 10:09, at least our time local, and it's looking like this within East Germany, southeastern Poland, and also within Norway and Sweden. There may be some airspace closures that are going on right now in Germany, Sweden, and Norway.
We got something big right now. We have a drone on Flight Radar 24. There is a drone called Test 611 flying around Warsaw right now. And Forster, go look at that. It's literally right there. That is a drone right there. It's being classified on the aircraft type as a drone. I'm not really sure how this data is being collected right now, but let's see here. It says here drone. It has no information on it except for its general location right there. That is, I've never seen anything like that before. That's extremely unusual right there. And Forster, what can you make of that?
I really don't know. I saw this earlier. I didn't want to make mention of it because there's no information provided. And considering that it's called Test 611, this may be a test by the Flight Radar software, possibly.
I don't think so. I've followed Flight Radar quite a bit. I see someone saying that's normal. I've never seen that before. So maybe I'm overreacting, but that seems unusual to me. I'm not sure what that's about. I've never seen it.
I've never really seen it either. But if it was a Russian drone, I don't think it'd be showing up on Flight Radar. So that's generally why I'm thinking it's not anything of a big deal, at least to me, to mention. But still, that is a little interesting. What are the flights that are skirting around this area? Air Serbia. Oh man, like Air Serbia, they got a history behind them. Let's see here. Nesma Airlines, and then there's also Heston Airlines, which is just an unmarked plane. And then Turkish Airlines.
Also, I'm seeing a lot of people say that this is some people are saying it's unusual. Some people are saying it's there often. I mean, I've never seen it. Maybe I've missed it the entire time, but I've never seen that on the radar, or not on the radar, but on the ADS-B data before. So I see Eric saying it's normal. He said I'm a 30-year commercial pilot, so maybe it is normal. I've never noticed it, but it is somewhat odd. It's being tracked number 10 worldwide right now too. So apparently other people are taking notice.
Man, they said, look at that! Like, look, it's a drone. But honestly, I mean, it is a little interesting. But that MMF 19, I wonder what that stands for. MMF 19. I wonder what that call sign is about. Mother
monetary fund.
But it's at 20,000 feet, 24,000 feet, traveling at 400 knots. So it's just chilling up there. I think it's just pre-positioned so that way if anything does happen, it's ready to support prolonged air operations. I think that's what it is. Where did it come from? It came from Cologne. What is in Cologne? Let me go look at Cologne really quickly. Köln, as they call it in Germany, or Cologne. They renamed it back on Google Maps. They actually used to call it Köln, K-O-L-N. Now it's back to Cologne. Let's see if the Germans haven't blurred out their airports yet, so we can get a little look around. And there is the aerial tanker right there that's probably up in the air at this moment. So they have one aerial tanker that just sits out at the Cologne International Airport, and then it takes off every once in a while, I suppose, and it's out there right now. This is actually a NATO-operated in-air tanker, so that is interesting to note. Because if y'all don't know, NATO actually does have some aircraft that are directly under NATO command, but most of NATO armed forces are a part of some national force, like the Polish Air Force or so on and so forth. So this is a NATO-operated stratotanker that was moved into the area most likely to assist the Polish in their own air operations. So
yeah, maybe so.
Yes, it does appear. It does appear. But with that, folks, we are going to be moving on into a couple of questions, at least for now, and then we're going to be getting on into the rest of the news for the night. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right. So honestly, at this point, I think I need a Tylenol for this. Like, I feel like I need a Tylenol. Nothing bad can happen. Only good can happen. At this point, this thing's giving me a headache, man. I'll tell you what, these drones and stuff, and NATO not responding to it. I need to take a Tylenol and make sure that nothing kicks in after I take it or nothing like that. But in all seriousness, no, I'm just joking, by the way. But jumping into our first super chat question here, this one is going to go to none other than Peace with War, who puts in a $100 support. And thank you very very much, Peace with War, for that massive support indeed. The largest super chat of the night. And Peace with War said, between the inaction from Russian aircraft coming into NATO airspace and the rise of support for a Palestinian state, why is there so much dissension in the West? And thanks for all you guys do.
And thank you so much for support, Peace with War. And that is a interesting question, and one that I wouldn't really be able to answer all too well, because it probably would start to get into the political dichotomy of a sort of the Western world that exists between one group and the other. Radicalism has been on the rise here in the West since the introduction of modernized social media, especially those operated by foreign countries. And because of that, there really isn't a way to answer that question well without it getting political sounding. The best way I could try and answer it is that a lot of people don't even understand what they're talking about, and a lot of people even in governments really don't know what they're talking about. Like, for example, last night, towards the end of the stream, there was a big argument that had come up about what the Second Amendment was for, and I've stated exactly what it was for by the historical example of what it was, and why it exists and why it's a thing. And some people said that it was for a totally different reason, which was to conduct an armed rebellion and overthrow the government, which is exactly not what the Second Amendment's for. So after that happened on air, I literally went through everything that I could last night and combed through it all, read the Federalist Papers, went back and I read everything that was relevant, the Militia Act of 1903, all that sort of stuff, and it lays out exactly what I said on air. But the modern argument, like, for example, just to show kind of the dichotomy that exists these days, and this is probably a pretty easy one to knock out, like, for example, on why in the world the Second Amendment even exists, the people on one side says it exists because I can pick up a gun and overthrow the government, which is just a complete bastardization of what it really is or what it even stands for. It's not even close to what it really is. And then the other side says that it exists because a whole bunch of old fogies just thought it'd be cool, and it's not even cool anymore, which completely misses the point of what it all is. Both sides don't even know what they're talking about. They're completely misinformed. And the reality is that it exists because it is understood that pretty much all males in the country aged 17 to 45 are a part of the national unorganized militia, and as a result of that, it is up to yourself, at least at that point, to furnish yourself with your own equipment and arms, so that way, if the government of your state calls you into service for the defense of the state against an armed invasion, you are ready to be able to fight on the behalf of your state government and on behalf of the nation at that emergency time of need. That's exactly what it is. You can literally go back and read Alexander Hamilton's writings in Federalist Papers 29, explaining that very sort of a deal 1 year after the Constitutional Convention was had and the Constitution was ratified. And you can also see that cited as well in the Militia Act of 1903, which lays out exactly who in the world is the militia, considering that that's one of the key parts of the Second Amendment. But it's that sort of an issue, at least in the modern world, that leads a lot of people to be really confused about what we're supposed to do, because in the event of any sort of an airspace incursion, that is a violation of sovereignty, which is one of the most serious actions that another state can take against a state, which is a nation. That is to be dealt with the maximum force possible. Any sort of incursion is not supposed to be allowed. This stuff is supposed to be shot down. But there's a lot of people out here in the West who think that this isn't a big deal because they don't know what the hell they're talking about. So they'll all sit there and say, oh, should we shoot down these drones? It's not even that big of a deal. We could start a third world war. And the real answer is if the Russians are that stupid to violate our sovereignty and think that we're not going to respond to it, and then threaten us with war if we respond to such a grievous action, I mean, if that is what people are scared of, then we can't avoid a war anyways. They're literally forcing us into one at that point. So that is something that, to me, is incredibly annoying and just extremely aggravating. And on top of that, with the whole Israel situation, that's one that really doesn't have an incredibly clear answer. Because if you look at either side down there, which is the Palestinians or the Israelis, both of them, if you look at them for what they really want, both of them want to have a one-state system. And the Palestinians want a Palestinian state, and that's the only state that's allowed to exist. And the Israelis want one state, and that's the Israeli state, and it's the only one that's allowed to exist. The original compromise compromise between the two, because you can't, you can't wipe out all of the Israelis and you can't wipe out all of the Palestinians, because that's the only way that you can achieve one or the other based on the wishes of the Israelis or the Palestinians. The only real answer to that was the compromise that we made in the UN partitions of 1947, which is a two-state solution where Palestine gets territory and the Israelis get territory. It generally is something that cuts it down the middle, and if any sort of radicalism exists beyond that, well, it's up to the right of whoever's being attacked, whether it be the Israelis or the Palestinians, to take up arms to defend themselves, because at that point, it's an armed attack against their territory or their nation for the larger part. That would be generally the best sort of a split down the middle, because we can't take all of the Gazans and relocate them. No one's going to take them. So they're stuck there. And you can't sit there and destroy the state of Israel, because then you're going to have to take all of the Israelis and relocate them elsewhere, and that's not going to happen either. So at this point, the only thing you can do is really create some sort of a compromise down the middle, and then if, for example, Hamas attacks Israel, well, I mean, Israel 100% has a right to go in to Gaza or wherever that attack came from and deal with it however they would choose. And if the Israelis attack, say, the West Bank or Gaza out of their own volition for no reason, the entire international world has a right to be able to respond to the Israelis and condemn them for that sort of inaction. That's just how it would work. But those sorts of things are generally mired greatly because of a great deal of confusion and ignorance that exists in the public on all ends, as a matter of fact, on how things work or how anything operates for that matter, because most people will not take it upon themselves to actually research anything or learn anything. They just listen to other people, what their opinions are, and they just go, oh, that's brilliant, I'm just going to go with that. And it might be a stupid idea, it might be a stupid argument that's being made, but they'll go with it just because it kind of aligns at some base level with what they emotionally want to hear, so they go with that. But anyways, I hope that does address it the best I can, and a huge thanks to you for the massive support and help with this channel to keep on running, and I hope that addressed that the best I can. And I also hope that that addressed the whole Second Amendment thing from last night with the receipts, because someone literally was saying in the chat, folks, that the Second Amendment gives them the right to make whatever laws they want, and I was like, that's kind of stupid, because it's like, doesn't that defeat the whole democratic process? And instead of replacing it with the tyranny of the many, it replaces it with a one-man tyranny, where this guy just thinks he has a gun so he can just do whatever he wants. It's like, that literally defeats the whole purpose of everything that the United States stands for, which is democratic representation. I was like, that guy is just absolutely insane. Like, really though, if you have a mindset like that, you're not even an American. You're literally a rebel or an insurrectionist at that point. And I would honestly have to say, in my opinion, if you are one of those people and the government arrests you eventually for trying to incite a rebellion or insurrection against the government, and you get tried, you end up in prison for 10 years. I mean, you kind of had it coming at that point. You're literally asking for the whole collapse of the country, or demanding it off of some sort of poorly conceived idea that doesn't even exist. But anyways, with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next super chat here. This one goes to Bobo Vasquez, and thank you very much, Bobo, for that $50 support right there, and that's very generous of you, and we appreciate that very, very much. He said, I have come to chew on bubblegum and support the LSA, and I'm all out of bubblegum from Rowdy Piper.
Hey, and thank you so much for your support. And I gotta say, a massive thanks to you for helping this channel to keep on running, Bobo Vasquez. And I gotta say that we are all out of gum. We have mints, and mints only. And so, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I gotta say, it's an amazing and wonderful thing to know that folks like you help us to keep this channel running and make this thing possible. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to run out of gum and keep this thing rolling. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news.
Also, by the way, just to give you all an update real quick before we get that last super chat, it looks like another aircraft is also passing through Berlin's airspace. So I'm not really clear. I'm seeing some German viewers say that Berlin airport is open and apparently it's operating normally. So maybe it's just an odd incident where the airspace was cleared out. I'm not really sure at the moment. So take all that with a grain of salt about that. The only thing we know for certain right now is Poland has closed 3 different airports in the eastern part of their country. And right now they have F-16s flying around, and also NATO tankers as well. So that's all we know for a fact right now. Everything else is pure speculation, and it looks like the NATO response is still taking place in the eastern part of Poland. We still see MMF-19, the NATO tanker, running the exact same circuit over, let's see here, what is that over exactly? It's over Lublin, actually. It's where it's currently circling around. So if you live in that part of Poland and you see that flying above your head, if you could snap a picture, I'd love to see a picture of that plane flying around. But moving on to our last super chat here, this one goes to Old Warrior. And Old Warrior puts in a $50 donation, and thank you very much, good sir, for that support as well. He said, I doubt Turkey will allow it into the Black Sea, referring, I believe, to the Russian submarine. He said it's going to be a very long way back to St. Petersburg, and isn't Storm Gabriel hitting the Azores off Portugal?
I think it actually is. That shouldn't affect a submarine. A submarine could just submerge and pretty much pass right through that storm. But I think you are correct. That is happening. And also the Turks will not allow them through, from what we know, either through the Bosphorus or the Dardanelles. So they're going to have to go all the way back through the Baltic and into St. Petersburg for that stuff. So that's going to be a long voyage, especially going at tug speeds with something in tow. That could take weeks to get back to St. Petersburg. So that subcrew better get used to the smell of diesel vapors, because they're going to be smelling that for weeks on end before they get back to port. But still, a huge thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, and because it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and keep this thing running and help us to keep in the business of covering news every single day. And so with that, folks, it's time for us to move on into the rest of the news for the night, which we still have an absolutely massive amount of. And I gotta be honest with you, Matthew, I am feeling quite tired as well tonight. And I'm like, dang, that coffee didn't hit that hard. But moving on into the news, it is time for us to move on into Washington, D.C. We have been able to hear that Zelensky has signed, or at least is preparing, to announce a $90 billion arms deal with the United States of America. That's a lot of
Holy
arms.
moly.
How many arms is that, Matthew? Is that like 5,000 arms? And how many legs is that? Is that another 50 legs?
That's a lot right there. That's arms, legs. That's the whole kit and shebang right there. Honestly, though, that is massive. Like, that can't be understated. That's a very big announcement right there that Zelensky is making. $90 billion in arms. That's almost getting close to the amount of arms we sent over the entire course of the Ukraine war thus far up to this point. And he's just signed a new deal with the United States to get that many more arms over. And once again, we don't know the exact period of time he's going to get those arms, but that's massive right there. In my opinion, that actually guarantees that Ukraine will be supported by the West, and that pretty much takes that out of the equation at this point. So that's huge.
I'd say it is absolutely massive. And on top of that, we have been able to hear that while that deal was made, unfortunately, the Pentagon's ambitious plan to field thousands of advanced drones for a potential conflict with China has fallen short, with the military struggling to figure out how to effectively use some of the systems. That was according to the Wall Street Journal today, so it does appear that we're still falling behind on the drone technology side of things, so not really the greatest thing to hear. Moving on out of the United States of America, though, and on towards the Middle East, we have also been able to hear that the Israelis are preparing for future strikes against the Iranians here within the next 3 months, if the current patterns persist with the continuing attempts at nuclearization by Iran. Inside of Iran today, we also were able to see that it appears that MiG-29s were spotted over the skies of the city. Where in the world were they during the 12-day war is a big question, but they are here right now.
Bastards.
Clown horn sounded in the city, noting that the MiG was flying over. We also were able to see that demands were apparently given to the Islamic Republic of Iran by the President of the United States, who has demanded that Iran hand over its entire enriched uranium stockpile in exchange for temporary relief from impending UN sanctions. And only temporary relief. Only temporary. A tough deal.
I thought the stockpile was destroyed. I thought that was the story. I thought the stockpile had been destroyed, according to what we had heard, or at least most of it or something. Why are we wanting to get their whole stockpile if it's been destroyed at this point? Am I missing something, or do I misunderstand it?
You are missing something, Matthew. You're fake news. You don't know what you're talking about. I mean, clearly we didn't destroy
I'm sorry. I'm the bad guy now. I'm the bad guy now. Enforcer Matt's the bad guy. You gotta, I'm just a news guy. Why are you picking on me? Come on, man.
I'm the biggest bird. I'm the biggest bird. But I would have to say, I think this is kind of an admission, Matthew. I think you and me both were noticing that. I think this is kind of an admission that it wasn't all obliterated in an airstrike.
Yeah, it seems like it to me. I don't know if maybe I'm like seriously speaking, I don't know if I'm missing something here, but if my memory serves me correctly, I thought the official US narrative was that in those B2 strikes, they took out the enriched uranium. Then there were some questionable statements about whether or not Israel said the uranium made it out and escaped. And then now we're hearing that there's apparently, allegedly, some negotiations going on to have the Iranians hand over their nuclear uranium stockpile in exchange for some type of deal with sanctions. So I'm not sure if we can keep this straight at this point. Honestly, I'm confused. I feel like, whoa, Jack, I feel like my brain's being turned to mush, but you know, that's pretty much status quo.
Oh, it's normal these days. Iran did recall its ambassadors after the activation of UN sanctions today from Germany, France, and the UK as well, as they attempt to work on their nuclear weapons still. Moving on from that and into Russia, actually we have a few more things to cover, at least inside the Baltics, before we move on all into the rest of this news that we have from elsewhere. Inside of Estonia, we were able to see some Abrams passing through on a freight train that was moving through the area near to Camp Tapa. Camp Tapa is within this area of Tapa, and you can see Camp Tapa right here. I don't know where the rail access is, or the railhead is, where the... Oh, I'm sorry, it's actually right up here. Here's the railhead where they drop off all of the tanks and equipment. Not that the Russians didn't already know that, but that's where the tanks are dropped off, you know. That's the tanks, that's where they're dropped off, you know. That the whole train comes in, they drop them off. But this thing is on the move to Camp Tapa at the moment, and we believe that it's some sort of a U.S. military unit that is being moved into the area. You can tell because they're in Desert 10, and for some reason we still think that we're going back to the Middle East, which honestly is probably true. But anyways, moving on from that, we also were able to hear that some remnants of a drone were found on the coast of Estonia, near to the border with Latvia. We got to see some cops riding a small jet ski through the marshes in this area and recovering the fragments. We will get more information on that hopefully in the coming days. We also were able to hear that after a meeting with all 32 members in NATO, the defense chiefs of all 32 members of NATO, the aircraft carrying the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, is currently outbound from Latvia and from Riga and heading back to the United States from what we know. So we'll be waiting to see when he returns what is going to be happening, at least as far as that's going. NATO is also going to be deploying an air defense frigate in the Baltics for further incursions by the Russians, so that way they can just shoot them down nice and easy. So, with all of that out of the way, it's time for us to move on into the Ukrainian news from the war itself. We were able to see that some drone attacks were being conducted today by Ukraine, and I put a heavy emphasis on some. It was only about 300 drones, which is kind of a light work day for the Ukrainians. And we also saw that there are some decent amounts of fires that have broken out over this year at gas facilities. All these little dots are places of the fires, and it appears that the Ukrainians have been very effective at hitting those locations. We also were able to see explosions by the air defense over Volgograd in this clip right here. Oh!
Oh, man. Damn, okay.
Damn, bro. Okay.
Also, by the way, folks, I want to make a quick note. Some guy just went crazy a minute ago because we didn't acknowledge the super chat within like 30 seconds. We appreciate all the super chats. As everybody on this channel knows, we appreciate y'all very much. Y'all are literally what helps to keep the channel running. But we do address our super chats during two different segments. We addressed one of the segments earlier, and then we address our second one at the end of the stream. So if you put one in, don't worry. We will get around to it. And we address every single one of them that comes in. So just want to let everybody know that. Because one guy went crazy over, so I'm not sure what was up with that. But just want to make that like clear off the bat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was sitting there, I was trying to see what the message was, and it was already removed, and so I was like, yeah. A lot of air defense over Volgograd, for sure.
Damn, son, where'd you find this? Like, literally, where'd they find that?
I think they found it down in the streets of Moving on from that, head on down to the coast near Tuaps. We also got a fresh clip of the attack that happened on Tuaps from days ago.
Oh, damn.
Вон он, бля, смотри, куда он, блядь, заплыл, ёпта.
That looked like it was booking it.
Oh, it was. And here it really is booking it. Look at this.
Oh my god.
Man, they got him.
Oh, sucker's fast.
Oh, here comes another.
Нихера себе.
Also, the Russians got a close-up of one of these because apparently one of them actually disconnected, and so it's just sitting out there now. So the Russians got a close-up look at the thing today.
I don't know if I'd walk near that.
I wouldn't either. The Russians, though, they are a little ballsy. A little too ballsy.
These things are well built, like, seriously. Like, these things are better built than the Russian Navy ships.
Really? I mean, honestly, man.
And these things are disposable.
О, какой бред.
This guy, he's fascinated by this.
They must have onboard cooling systems or something, because I hear like a fan running.
Yeah, you know, I just wouldn't walk around this thing because it has like a 1,000-pound bomb sitting inside of it. But this guy, he doesn't care. He thinks he's fine. Later, we heard that this guy partly went to Germany and also to Iran at the same time. I wonder why. But anyways, moving on from that, remember, folks, don't ever walk around an unexploded bomb. That is an unexploded bomb that just happens to look like a jet ski. That guy's not smart for walking around something like that. It's very stupid and dangerous. But moving on from that and into Crimea, we also got to see the lack of fuel is still ongoing. The fuel lines, they grow. Also, why in the world is this guy holding a fuel pump up to his head? A little bit of an odd sort of a poster. But anyways, we also got to see that the price of gas, at least wherever it's available, is now reaching 90 rubles a liter. That means that Russian gas right now is $4 a gallon.
Damn, that's pretty steep for them. Wait a minute, $4 USD? Like you're translating to US dollars?
Yes, $4 a gallon.
Oh, dang. That's like to the Russians and their currency, $4 USD. That's like what would it be, like $12 USD or something to them? Like what would be the equivalent?
It would be for the Russians. It would be like, yeah, it would be something like $12. Actually, no, it'd be more like $20 a gallon for them. At least, you know, like for the income that they make.
Yeah, that's crazy right there. They can't afford that gas. That gas right there is what they call, it's not cheap gas.
Man, that ain't cheap. That ain't cheap. But moving on from that clip and on out of Crimea, it's now time for us to get on into the war itself. And we were able to get the casualty report for the day. And let me go and get that for y'all really quickly to make sure and show y'all exactly what was going on today down there on those front lines. And holy moly, 2 Bobcat skid steers.
Oh my God. We got 2 Bobcats. Look at that. I'm telling you what, that's crazy news right there. 2 Bobcats, 2 of them, they went down, down, down. But tell us more.
And MSDC Keeper the Record stated that 362 drones is the 10th highest daily loss, and all totals are trending below prior months, except drone losses, which may reach 10,000 here quite soon. Well, UAV losses may reach 10,000 over the course of this month. But over the course of the past 24 hours, we have been able to confirm that 970 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed, along with 1 APC, 91 supply trucks, 1 main battle tank, 39 artillery pieces, 362 drones, 1 MLRS, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and the 2 Bobcat skid steers. It was a great and wonderful day, and it's a good thing to note that the Ukrainians are still holding their lines. Now, moving down the front, we were able to see that the Ukrainians near to the area of Svatove were hitting some of those drone attacks on the Russians, and also pulling out that Wii Sports music. High score!
You did it. Oh, man. Better luck next time. Ruski bliat.
Strike! New high score! Dun.
Try
dun,
what the Russian version of that same thing, the sports game. Try again next time, suka bliat. You can do better, you bastard.
Man, suka, блядь, пиздяк, иди нахуй, блядь. Like, it's just cussing you out, like when you do something bad or good.
Man, I'll tell you what, that golf game goes hard when you're getting cussed at by, Ivan.
I'll be honest with you, man. I mean, the Russians, they don't have fun. They never smile, folks. That's right, folks. Nobody in Russia ever smiles. Have you ever seen Lavrov smile? He's got nothing to smile about. Point proven. Moving on from that and down the line, we also got to see near to the Lehman area, some Russians also getting hit within this direction in the 53rd Mechanized Brigade, otherwise known as the Signum Male Drone Unit.
I'll let they added like captions to this one. They said they brought it to the place where they unloaded it, and we sent a night FPV. Oh wow, an FPV of the night. That Euro who left was destroyed by his rivals. Worked on the gun. Sounds like a gang war. There on the video, you can see two occupiers next to each other with her. With her. What? Sorry. What the hell? I'm going to miss it. Is that a mistranslation? I guess.
And the following day, our crew worked. They just worked. They just clocked in. On the same gun and made it sweat. She locked up for... I don't think these subtitles are real.
I think they're calling the gun a she or something like that.
Man, I mean, they were putting it to work, apparently. But moving on down the line and on towards the Konstantinivka front, we also got to see some Russians getting hit down here. Or at least one of their artillery pieces getting obliterated. That's a D-30 right there. And now it's a D-nothing. That thing is cooking down there. And here's a Mista B. This one will also disappear.
Also, by the way, folks, I'm seeing some people saying that they're hearing loud explosions over Poland. Take those reports with a grain of salt, because some people mistake the sounds of a sonic boom for the sound of an explosion, like a munition exploding. Some people don't know the difference between the two, so when they hear a sonic boom from an F-16, they immediately think, oh, there's air defense or something's exploding in the sky, we're being attacked, and it's not always the case. So until we have video evidence, I say take all that with a grain of salt.
Oh yeah, take everything like that with a grain of salt. Some people will just sit there and say, "Trust me, I'm in Poland," and they'll be like in Germany, and then they'll say something like, "Oh, there's huge explosions. There's 9,000 drones. We're all dying," and then nothing's going on, and they're just trying to call some hype and get some exposure.
You don't want to hype it up too much, because it could just be sonic booms. It could just be F-16s, because they could be scrambling to get to the border quick.
But these drones are making holes in one all over the place. I mean, they would be good at golf.
Oh, something right there had a little mushroom cloud with it. Look at that. A Davy Crockett.
Man, a little toasty. Man, that was like a little, like a mini nuke or something launched by a fat boy.
A fat man.
Fat man, whatever. It's same thing, kind of, But anyways, we also get to see the 109th hitting some Russian forces with their drones as well. Pretty much every unit in the armed forces of Ukraine is just using drones almost primarily at this point. But it is quite effective.
Oh, look, I guess, where were they? Right there. Oh, look.
Look, they're right here. Man, they have like 5 arrows pointing out the burning fire, and they're like, it's right here. It's like, yes, it is. Good job.
I like it when they dumb it down like this. Makes it real easy. I can just look at it with no brain thought and go, there it is, right there.
Get them, boys. Bam, and there they go.
Oh, wow, they started a fire. That's not good.
Man, they toasting. And that's
I'll tell you, Smokey the Bear, he's having a stroke right now. He said, hey, only you can put it out.
Man, they're tweaking. But we also got to see the 55th Artillery hitting some Russian positions in the trees down near Pokrovsk. Oh, man, honestly, dude, that was pretty funny. I'm not going to lie.
I was thinking, I gotta make Smokey sound like he's tweaking, like he's stroking out. That's the best I could do.
Oh, man. Moving on from that clip, we also get to see a couple of the roads of Pokrovsk. Here's a dirt bike unit making their way towards the city of Pokrovsk, or at least the general area. The Russians aren't in Pokrovsk. That would be a lie. Also, I see some people talking about the prices of gas. Here in Alabama, gas generally is, at least depending on the grade of gas that you're getting, it's generally somewhere between $3.20 to $3.30, and the maximum price is getting close to $4. That's the price of gas in Alabama. Man, this is a lot of carnage on this road, a lot of destroyed vehicles and such,
It is quite a lot.
I think this guy's about to get thrown off this bike. But that's the end of that clip. Oh, we didn't get to see him get thrown off. But moving on down and into Novorossiysk, we also get to see a little bit more of the road of death down here. There goes a couple of Russians. They're being added to it. What a coincidence. All of these destroyed Russian vehicles on this one road.
Hard to believe that this failing army right here, the leader of this failing army, wants to see if he can provoke the biggest alliance in the world, which is NATO, to see if he can try to start a bigger war, considering he can't even fight the smaller war right here. He's getting his ass whooped by Ukraine. The underdog's whooping the ass of the big bad bear, allegedly. That was the big bad bear. Turns out they're not so big and bad anymore, though. That whole illusion's been shattered.
Honestly, I never believed in that illusion at all. I always thought the Russians were incompetent and stupid, and that they weren't going to make it that far. Their military just isn't that well off. That's also why, folks, I thought they'd never start this war, because their military was so bad. I was like, there's no way in hell they do that. They even know their military is bad. And then they did it anyways. And then they realized, like everyone already knew, their military is really bad. But moving down to Velika Novorossiysk, we also get to see the Russians getting hit down here by the Bulava, or the Presidential Brigade.
I knew when the war started. Like, I remember saying it for such a long time before it started. I remember saying, they're going to do it. They're going to do it. And everybody was saying, they're not going to do it. Be quiet. They're not going to do it. Russia wouldn't do nothing like that. They said, Russia wouldn't do that. That makes no logical sense. And I said, they're going to do it. And like, believe me, they're going to do it. They're telling me, believe me. And then it happened. And I was like, look, it happened. It happened. And everybody's like, oh, wow, it really did happen. I can't believe it. I was like, yeah, I knew it. That's why when people try to attribute logic to the Russians, that's dangerous to do that, because the Russians don't always play by logic. Sometimes it's just pure stupidity and ego, because Putin's the one making the decisions and he doesn't take any input. So it usually goes bad.
Man, honestly, it's gone insanely badly for them. That's why I thought they wouldn't invade in the first place, because it's like, well, that would just be absolutely stupid, because the Russians' military is incredibly bad off. I had been reading about it in books on what we knew in the West about their military, and there were clear signs, major red flags, that the Russian military was poorly performing, even off of what happened in 2014 in the Donbass and in Crimea. And people were going, it seems like they have a problem with communication, command, the logistics, all the important things that you need to be able to actually fight a war. They were having huge problems with, and especially in the 2008 invasion of Georgia, they were having huge problems with it. And so everyone was saying, well, it doesn't really look like they're that good off as a military. And so I was thinking, leading up to the war in Ukraine, I was like, there's no way they're going to start this war, because they know that they have to know that their military is so bad off. There's no chance in hell this will turn out well. I mean, even a country like Ukraine at the time, which was equipped with Soviet-era technology only, would give them a run for their money, because the Ukrainians had conducted significant military reforms in 2017, and the Russians really had not conducted any reforms that were significant or really changed how they fought. And then they found out the hard way by starting the war and then going right into the worst decision that they've ever made. But we also got to see some Russians getting slammed by the Ronin down here in Zaporizhzhia. Take a little look at this. The drone's flying over. It's trying to find its targets.
What was that thing in the sky? Was that the sun?
That was the sun, and it burns.
Oh dear. The biggest drone, the sun.
And someone said, read about it. Yeah, people make books about the Russian military like it's modern day condition. It's very interesting reading, at least to me. I read about that kind of stuff all the time. It's either that or railroads or some sort of logistics, like with shipping or something like that. Like, I read really mundane books. I just read stuff like that. I find it very interesting, and that's why I belt out all kinds of interesting facts out of the blue. It's because I don't always read books that have to deal with, like, World War II or, some sort of a niche thing like a lot of people do. I just read straight up details and information on the everyday goings on of our lives nowadays, and that's how I just belt out all kinds of information about everything around the world. Also, sorry folks if I don't sound incredibly energetic. For some reason, I'm feeling like really fatigued tonight and under the weather, and I was trying to camouflage that all day long, but now on air, I'm like kind of feeling it a little bit, so if I sound a little bit slower or lower energy, that's the reason why, and I do apologize, folks. I don't mean to sound like that. But we could see them hitting the back of a Russian van, dead on the nail. And again.
And again. They did it again. Just for the viewers' enjoyment.
And another one.
Oh, waiter, another one, please. Another headpiece, please. Serve it up fresh. We want it with the garnish on the side. Please serve it up fresh. Come on, officer, arrest me. Arrest me.
Arrest me and search my baseballs, bats, and other things.
Remember, folks, this war right here is something that could have been won in a week. Nothing bad can happen, only good can happen. That's what they say. Don't take it. Don't do it. Don't do war. Don't do it.
Only do better. But moving on up into Kyiv, we also were able to see some air defense fire over the city earlier. This was right before we went on air.
Пиздец. Просто пиздец. Да. Хер поспишь.
And that's the end of that clip, and that's actually the end of our news for the day. There was no speech made by President Zelensky today. He was busy doing other stuff, like running a nation in the middle of a war. So unfortunately, he was not able to make a good speech today. So that means that we're going to be moving on into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And it's an incredibly fun time. And I got to say that's even more shocking to see that over the course of about an hour and 50 minutes, 101,000 people have watched this stream, and we had a peak viewership tonight of 16.6 thousand people. That's a lot of folks, and that's a lot of live viewers, and we still have 14.5 thousand people here right now. I got to say that we're entirely honored and greatly appreciative to have had all of y'all here for our news segment so far tonight. I hope that y'all continue to stick around for us to cover the rest of the questions that we have from all of y'all and to get to talk to all of y'all about literally anything and everything, as long as it isn't religion, politics, climate change, or whether the A-10 is relevant in combat or not. All those things can't be touched on, but everything else can be, and we will be making sure to get into all of that in depth throughout the course of the night. And I gotta say, folks, that it is one hell of an amazing thing to be here on the show again tonight. I hope that y'all been all enjoying our show and channel for the day. A lot of people have watched the video that Enforcer Matt made. It's gotten 286,000 views so far today. It's getting towards 300,000 on this stream. It's done great well as well. And so, of course, folks, we're gonna be making sure to move on into our questions. All of those questions. Wonderful questions. Incredible questions. And Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our last part of the stream, our last question segment, we got a lot of stuff to get to. We got a poll to get to, we got breaking news to get to, and all of our super chats and live chats and the Morse code decoders. So starting off first, folks, before we jump into this poll, a quick breaking news update, because I'm sure a lot of people are still wondering what is happening right now inside of Poland. So based on what we know right now, we know right now Enforcer Matt's fighting for his life. But outside of that, though, we are seeing that Polish air traffic control has cleared out eastern Poland's airspace with only a single NATO tanker patrolling the area, and also an unseen number of NATO fighters, including Polish fighter jets as well. So that is still happening right this second. We're still seeing MMF-19, which is the NATO tanker, currently circling around the area of eastern Poland. So that is happening right this second. We have not gotten any confirmed reports that any type of drone incursion has occurred inside of eastern Poland. So we haven't seen that or heard it right now as of what we're knowing right this second. But also another thing that's interesting is we are seeing that the Pentagon's reporting above average traffic right now when it comes to the pizza report. So Enforcer, go show them that pizza report real quick, and let me go get a bottle of water before I choke on all the sandpaper that's currently in my mouth. So I'll be right back.
Honestly, that's been a struggle tonight, even for me. I actually got a cup of water before we went live on air. At least right during our countdown, and that's also why, unfortunately, I missed some of y'all's hellos. But even still, I've been having an issue with that tonight. It's a little bit wild, but still, Papa John's is seeing some incredibly high activity, along with Papa John's also seeing incredibly high activity, along with Pizzato Pizza, which is seeing unusually high activity, and also Domino's Pizza, which is seeing somewhat higher activity, but nobody likes Domino's as much as they like Papa John's. Papa John's is clearly just the winner of what kind of pizza is preferred by the Department of War, the Department of Defense. They like that pizza. I like it too. I think Papa John's is pretty good. Better ingredients, better pizza. That's what they always said. And then Papa John's also said that he had 30 pizzas in 40 days and that the quality was dropping and that the day of judgment's coming. And I don't know what the hell he meant by that. The day of judgment hasn't come yet, but he's apparently livid about that whole pizza thing. So we'll have to see what's going on with that. But anyways, Matthew, what do you got to say?
So we did see that pizza report there, and also, by the way, I got some water, so hopefully I'll be good to go now. But we are seeing, like I mentioned, just to recap that real quick, currently there is an ongoing situation in Poland, no confirmed drone incursions right now, and we're waiting to hear an update on it. So currently monitoring that on flight radar. It's MMF-19 that's currently circling around the area. It's still running that exact same circuit near Lublin. So that's what we're hearing right now. So with that, folks, we are now jumping into our poll question that's currently running. It says, today Zelensky announced a $90 billion arms deal with the United States. And the big question is Ukraine finally on stable ground? And 39% said yes, Ukraine is good to go now, while 33% said no, Ukraine is still at the mercy of the United States. And 19% said I'm 50-50 on this one. And in my opinion, I think Ukraine is good to go now. Once that $90 billion arms deal is once again signed, and I believe it sounds like it is signed based on what we're hearing right now, it sounds like Ukraine has gotten guaranteed all of those weapons right there. So they're not free, according to what we know, but nonetheless, Ukraine will get what it needs to fight the war. So I'm actually with the 39%. Ukraine is good to go, and this pretty much seals the deal. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that I would be with the 39%. They're good to go. This seals the deal, because if the United States is willing to get into such a large financial agreement with the Ukrainians, such as $90 billion, that's a lot of money. And that's got to show that they're on good ground at this point. I think it's a good thing. And so I'd have to be with a 39% as well. And so with that, I hope that it's addressed that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, folks, it's time for us to start moving on to those questions. What do we got, Matthew? What do we got?
All right, so jumping into our super chat questions now, our first one here goes to Bobby43, who is also known as LC39A, and thank you very much, good sir, for that massive $100 support right there, and we do appreciate that very, very much. And also, just double checking here, he did not leave a comment with his first one, but he did leave a comment with his second one, which I'll go ahead and read that off right now. He also threw in a $50 support for a total of $150, and thank you very much, Bobby, for that. He said, Enforcer is slower, but he's not panting, LOL.
And I thank you for the massive support, Bobby43, and I thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And I gotta say that, at least I'm not panned. That's true. I'm for some reason today, earlier in the day, I was feeling fine. I was full of energy, but getting towards the later point of the night, I started to feel really tired, and now I'm feeling like kind of tired and a little bit sick. Like, I kind of felt like that yesterday, too. Like, I actually told Matthew before the show I was feeling a little bit weird, kind of like a light version of car sickness. Like, that's kind of what it felt like. And today, I think I might actually be coming down with a little bit of something. Hopefully nothing too bad. Hopefully I can just power through it, and it won't be too bad. But I think I might be coming down with a little bit of something at this point. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, Bobby43. Because in the meantime, you're helping us to keep this channel running and helping us to make this thing possible. So that way we can be on air every single day and to continue to cover the massive news. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that is addressed that the best that we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Jake, and Jake puts in a $35 donation, and thank you very much, Jake, as well, for that support, and also, once again, a huge shout out to Bobby43 for that support earlier as well. But Jake said, with his $35 support, he said, I really enjoy watching your channel, and get Flight Radar Premium on me, and thank you for the information.
Hey, and we will get Flight Radar Premium. I've got to get it so that way we stop having those ads running on air. So we will make sure to get that. And a massive thanks to you so much for the support and the kind words, because we'd love to know that you've been enjoying this channel and that you're helping us to keep this thing running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we just never would be able to make this thing possible. We would have never been able to be here tonight. So thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And also, unfortunately, you might have to take a Tylenol if it doesn't get better. You might have to take one.
You know, actually, man. Speaking of Tylenol, folks, I've actually been, I'm in a like a model railroading sort of a thing, and I've actually been hearing, folks, that the stocks are falling in the model railroad world because they found out that Tylenol has been causing all of us to be into the trains. I really didn't know. Like, I thought it was just kind of like a normal thing. Apparently, it's a side effect of the after effects of what happens when folks have Tylenol and then you have a kid. So I was like crazy. I was like crazy. I thought I was just like this. No, it's actually that. I feel absolutely devastated, and no one's into model railroading anymore because of that. It's a shame, honestly. It's unfortunate. But I mean, you gotta love trains. I mean, like, who in the world doesn't love trains? I love trains a great deal. I mean, apparently a lot of the people out there in the open source intelligence world like trains. I mean, Intel Schizo likes them. So I finally there's someone out there who gets it. Like, I was like, yeah. I was like, when I saw that, I had to comment on that directly on Twitter today because I was like, no way. Like, Intel Schizo has been following us on Twitter for a very long time, and I was like, that is really cool to see that he is also big into trains. I was like, that's cool. I think that's neat, and I appreciate that a great deal. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can. And I see some people saying steam trains are the best. You know, that's something that I'm a bit up in the air on because steam trains are really cool and I think they're super neat. But the thing is that from an operational perspective for railroads, steam trains are somewhat unreliable and they're also really maintenance heavy. And that's why everyone eventually dieselified. And a lot of people always say, oh, you know, like we could really make a super powerful steam engine nowadays with modern technology. And I definitely would agree. But the maintenance bill for a steam train would still be really high because you would have to deal with scaling because of the water, and you would have to deal with if it's oil fired, you would have to deal with the eventual cleaning of the firebox because that still has to be done. And if it's coal, you have to deal with the ash and all that sort of a deal, and cleaning it and cleaning all of the flues, and that gets pretty in depth and very expensive, and that takes a lot of manpower to be able to do that sort of a thing. And that's why everyone wanted to move to diesel, is because they're like, wow, you can just run this thing all the time, and it requires like practically little maintenance compared to a steam engine. But I would have to say steam engines are really cool. One that I've been looking at recently is the Nickel Plate Road, the NPK 765. It's the NKP 765. Let me put that in right. Because this one's pretty cool. This is actually, if you know anything about the trains, this is actually the one that the Polar Express is based off of. I think to a degree, but it is a really nice looking one, and I was hearing that it was traveling around, I think, here in the future, and I was like, oh, is it coming through here? And it isn't. But on the bright side, folks, I did get to hear that, because I've never seen this one before in my life, that Union Pacific 4014, which many people will know, it's world famous, it's the big boy, is actually going to be coming to Salt Lake City next year, in 2026, and we're going to be in Salt Lake City in 2026. That's where the headquarters is moving, so I might actually get a chance to go see the Union Pacific big boy when it pulls into Salt Lake City. I would hope. That's super cool. Like I don't think anyone can disagree that this thing just looks absolutely cool. It's powerful looking, it's menacing, it's also articulated, which is just incredibly interesting from a mechanical standpoint. And the fact that it still runs is really one of the more shocking things about it. But still, I hope that was our train rabbit hole for the night. And also, you can see right here in this picture carrying around the brand new Abraham Lincoln heritage unit that they made that just says Abraham Lincoln on the side. Like, that's all it is. It's just an Abraham Lincoln train because the Union Pacific worships Abraham Lincoln because Abraham Lincoln was the guy who gave the Union Pacific the charter to exist as a railroad and to also start construction on their part of the Transcontinental Railroad. So that's why Union Pacific loves Abraham Lincoln. That's why they even have an engine with his name on it. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next one here. This one goes to Hackneys and Rhinelanders, who puts in a $100 donation of massive support right there. And thank you very much, Hackneys, for that support. We do appreciate that. Extremely generous of you. He said, I was geeking out on war songs yesterday and wondered what the enforcers like. For my money, he said here, there's a little IRA song right there. He said also, and the Battle of New Orleans. He said, thanks for all the incredibly hard work. LSA forever. And also, feel better, enforcer.
Hey, and hopefully I'll feel better tomorrow. I hope that this isn't anything I'm going to start getting sick from. I hate being sick, and I hate that sometimes it makes me so sick I really can't talk well, so I have to stop doing this. But beyond that, I would have to say that Come out, you black and tans! Come out and fight me like a man. That is a song that's really famous from the Troubles, with the IRA and everything. That's a really famous one. And then let's see the other one, the Battle of New Orleans. That's a pretty interesting one too. I think that one's famously sung by Johnny Orton, if I'm not mistaken. But as far as war songs go, I generally listen to military songs when it comes to that sort of a deal. So I'll listen to stuff from America, like God Bless America, Battle Hymn of the Republic, Over There, Battle Cry of Freedom, those sorts of songs for the United States, Columbia, the Gem of the Ocean, the Armed Forces songs, of course, and then the Star Spangled Banner and songs like that. I really like patriotic songs a good bit, but I also listen to them from other countries, and really that has no limit. I'll even listen to Soviet-era military songs like March of the Artillerymen, and even North Korean ones sometimes, and Chinese ones as well, because I listen to them because if you listen to them and you also read the lyrics to these songs, you get a decent idea, at least at an idealistic level, of what their ideology is or what they heavily emphasize. And this is what I get from like each country as far as their songs. America is all about winning. That's it. Like, it's just winning. We're all together and we're gonna win this thing. Russian songs all revolve around everyone's gonna die tonight, and this is our last day alive, so it's really depressing but kind of bittersweet. That's every single Soviet song that's ever existed. Or it's the other one, which is the outlier, which is Stalin gave us the order, we love Comrade Stalin, we will die for Comrade Stalin. That's the only outlier in the Russian song category for their military music. Everything in Korea revolves around their great leader. We love this guy to pieces, and he's the greatest guy alive, so we're all going to die for him tomorrow just because he's just that cool. Like, our lives are worthless compared to this guy, he's great. And then China, all of their songs are always about uniformity. Like, that's something that is heavily invested in their lyrics and their songs, is uniformity. A lot of their songs revolve around that sort of a thing, which is really interesting because it emphasizes the Maoist collective of the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army, at least in its original inception, not in the Jinpingism era, but in the Maoist eras before. Really interesting sort of a thing to hear. And then Japan really doesn't have a lot of military songs. They just have the Batatai, and that's been, of course, like Weenie Hut Jr.'d in the modern day to get rid of all the references of, we'll die for the emperor, yada, yada, yada. But they still have that song. And then everyone in Europe, Britain has some nice songs. Every single one of their songs is we're marching down the mall on parade and we're looking really clean. And honestly, they do. The French have songs that just, I really don't know a lot about their songs, because they have one called Chant of the Onion, and it's literally about onions, and that's an actual song of the French military. Then everyone knows the German ones, but primarily the ones from before World War II are the ones that are used the most in Germany, and those are very interesting because they're always talking about going home. Every German song is about going home to their girl. And then every song kind of heading east of Germany, they start getting more depressing sounding the closer you get to Russia, Ukraine included. But anyways, I hope that does address it the best I can. That's my 2 cents on military music. But military music is really interesting to me, especially the historical ones, and especially when you follow them through the different eras. You can actually find out what a country wants to believe or what they want their people to believe by their songs and the lyrics that they have. And I think that I would actually have to say that patriotic music, or at least inspiring patriotic music, is incredibly important to a country as a part of its identity, because it gives people something catchy to listen to that conveys the ideals or beliefs that the nation is supposed to have as a whole. So I would actually have to say that music, as far as military or patriotic music goes, actually has a really important place, at least in modern culture, even still. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running with your massive support. And I hope that does address that incredibly well, because it is folks like you who help this channel to keep on running and make this thing possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and then our next one here goes to Danny B. It is Chef Danny of the LSA, and he puts in a $50 donation, and thank you very much,
Hey!
Danny, for that support. He said, "Good evening, Enforcers. Chef Danny here, and I hope you all are doing well tonight, since NATO is so busy not shooting down the drones, instead of just watching them. Oh, look, a drone, and why not follow them? And LT, LSA.
And thank you so much for the support, and thank you for the kind words, Danny B, chef of the LSA. And NATO is something, you know. I hope that they do work on shooting down the drones instead of just watching them, because one day they're going to watch one of those things fly right into a turbofan on a passenger airliner and kill 30 people or more than that. And so hopefully we will be able to hear that eventually they'll shoot them down. But a big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and help us to keep this thing running. And I got to thank you massively for that. And I hope that things have been going well out there in Denver, and I hope that your food catering business is going quite well. So massive thanks to you so much once again. And also, Andrew Honeycutt just brought up an interesting point about military music or certain songs. You're actually right, Andrew Honeycutt. In the Civil War, at least for the Confederacy, there was one song that was explicitly banned from being sung, which was Lorena. And if y'all know anything about the song Lorena, it's a really old one, but it's really nice, actually. I really like this song. The song Lorena is about a pastor. This is the actual story behind the song. It's about a pastor from a small town in Kentucky, and there was a girl from a wealthy family that he really liked and he wanted to marry. So he proposed to her and asked to marry her, and she refused, not because she didn't love him. She loved him greatly. They both loved each other a great deal. But her family refused her marrying him because he was not of a high enough social status, and he was a lowly pastor who was, pretty much a pauper, as pastors were back in the day. Very different than the televangelists of the modern age, but he was poor, he wasn't of a right social class, and also pastors didn't really make it much anywhere, at least back then. They didn't make a lot of money, because you don't make a lot of money living a pious kind of a life like that. So this pastor was absolutely stricken by this with grief. He just hated it so much. So he wrote this song Lorena, which talked about while they couldn't be together or ever married in their life now, they would be together in heaven eventually after they pass long from now. And so it's a very moving song, actually, even today. Like, if you listen to it, it's a very sweet and really sad song, actually. And Confederate soldiers would sing it at the beginning of the war, and a lot of them would sit there and the song would hit them so hard when they would sing it and think of the lyrics that a lot of them would just start to desert. So the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia and multiple different armies throughout the Confederacy actually started to issue orders that the song was forbade to be sung, and soldiers who sung it were to be jailed for a certain period of days, usually weeks, or they were to be fined significantly and have that deducted from their pay to pretty much enforce them not singing it. That was actually one of the songs that was banned. I think another one that was banned, at least in the stockades where Union soldiers were kept prisoners in the Confederacy, I think Tramp, Tramp, Tramp was another one that was banned, and that one was one that was supposed to lift up the prisoners' spirits, at least of the Union, that were held by the Confederates, because they were supposed to be singing that one day they'll be back home, and the Union will, I just hit my leg there on the desk, but the Union will eventually beat them, or the Confederacy, that is, and they'll all be able to go home. And I think that one was also banned inside the stockades. But anyways, you're right on that. Really interesting thing, because, for a nation that heavily believes in free speech, and even the Confederacy to a limited extent believed in it, it's really interesting to hear that you were banning straight up just songs. Just a little bit of a crazy sort of a thing. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least the best I can. And we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Just a Plumber, who puts in a $25 donation, and thank you very much, good sir, Just a Plumber, for that support as well. He said, when the merch store gets going, I need a giant gold and blue LSA mouse pad, and call it the Enforcer Matt. Hey, that's I like that, actually. That's pretty cool. He said, also, I want to welcome my brother to the LSA.
Hey, and welcome to your brother, to the Lee Spring Army. And also, that would be a really cool branding idea, Matthew. Make an LSA flag and call it the Enforcer Mat. That would be a really good one.
Honestly, if that's my name on it, it's got to have my face on it, too. So every time you go to grab your mouse, you're going to see Enforcer Matt's face under it. Very, very zoomed in.
Oh my goodness, bro, that would be hilarious, dude. That would be good. Oh man, honestly, that would actually be pretty funny. We might have to make that a merchandising idea. That's actually a pretty good one. But a big thanks to you so much for your support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep it running. And also, before we move on to the next one, Andrew Honeycutt's whipping out all the songs I know. "Tending Tonight on the Old Campground" is a really good song. I love that one because it's usually it's played really somber like, and it's really sad because it's talking about they're tending on the old campground, thinking of days gone by. It's literally the lyrics, but it's a really sad one, and I'm like, man, that actually was a really good song because it conveyed a lot of the emotion that those soldiers that some soldiers had during the war of homesickness, which nowadays we call PTSD to some extent. That's what they called it back then, somewhat. So that is a really good song. I like that one too. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
Man, and our next one here goes to Marion Deemer, who puts in a 30. And thank you very much, Marion, for that support. We do appreciate that very, very much. And Marion's, of course, channel legend. And Marion said, "Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, and hugs to all."
Hey, and thank you for the massive support, Marion Deemer, and Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, and also big hugs to the entirety of the Leaf Spring Army. I got to thank you massively for the support. You've been helping us to keep this channel running pretty much ever since it started covering news day in and day out. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Gunfox. And thank you very much, Gunfox, for the 3 super chats in a row. It's good to see you once again. And he starts off with some history, some days in history about the space missions. And Gunfox said on his first one, on December 2nd of 1999, the STS-35 was the 10th flight of Space Shuttle Columbia and the 38th shuttle mission. It was devoted to astronomical observations with Astro 1, a space lab observatory consisting of 4 telescopes. Question from the chat.
And thank you so much for your support, Gunfox, and thank you for sharing a little bit of information about STS-35, one of the great missions of the Space Shuttle Columbia and its voyages through space. And I gotta say, thank you so much for the support, sharing that with us, and we will make sure to get a live chat. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so our live chat question here in honor of Gunfox's super chat. This one's going to go to The Spy, who said, how do Russian drones showing up on the other side of Europe, and are they being detected by NATO or the EU?
From what we know, they're being detected by the European Union, and only when they're really flying over something sensitive like an airport. So that's what we're generally knowing at the moment. And so I hope that does address that live chat the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next super chat from Gunfox.
And Gunfox's second super chat says STS-39 was the 12th mission of the NASA Space Shuttle Discovery and the 40th orbital shuttle mission overall, and the primary purpose of the mission was to conduct a variety of payload experiments for the DO.
And also, take a look at this. This was a picture taken from the mission of the Aurora Borealis, or the Aurora Australis, actually.
The Aurora Australis, that's the one that's not acitve. Minifin. You gotta remember, you gotta have the acetve. Don't take. Oh man.
The acetve. Oh man. But beyond that, really cool actually. And also, this was another cool picture that came from this mission of what is apparently a crystal ionization velocity experiment, which looks really cool actually. The pictures from this mission go hard. I like them, and I think they're pretty neat. What was the patch? This was the patch. Huh.
Are these people's names on those?
Yeah, these are the names of the astronauts in the mission on this patch.
Interesting. I've never really heard these last names before. These are very unusual last names. Also,
Like
Hammond. Oh, I didn't know Richard was on this one.
Man, Hammond! He's in the space shuttle going to space. Also,
I'm not gonna crash it.
Man, he would crash. Like that's man. I think he probably would. But Coates. That's not even a person. He just brought Coates along in the mission, so they just added them on. But also Veach. Hey, yo, what's up, you son of a Veach? Like the man, or Bluford.
Bluford, the big red dog.
Oh man. And here's also a picture of them. Man, this is a very 80s looking picture. Why does this guy look like Willem Dafoe here on second to the left?
I don't know. I don't really know.
Also, this guy, he looks sinister. I mean, he's the downward tilt on his head, the giant smile. The deader eyes. He's scaring me. Like he's scaring me a little bit. This guy looks like he's about to
Man,
sell me a car.
he's just excited for the mission, man. You gotta get on your game face for this mission. You're about to do something crazy, go into space. You gotta get ready for it.
I mean, I suppose. This guy in the middle though, they got the spotlight on him. And also, on top of that, he looks like he's a car salesman. Like, I don't know why, folks, but this guy gives also a very heavy car salesman kind of a vibe. But interesting.
He's Captain James T. Kirk of the starship STS-39.
Spock, what would put you in this new Impala? Like, that's what he's about to say. But honestly, though, pretty cool picture. Like, outside of that. And also, I like the fog around their shoes. Like, they really worked hard on making this picture. This is back when NASA actually had a budget, which is no longer the case these days. But anyways, with that, folks, I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, Boba Vasquez said that orange is definitely dated. I mean, honestly, I don't think the orange is that bad. I think it's kind of okay, really. I think one of the worst ones that I've seen, at least in my memory, were those older ones from the early Apollo missions. Let's see, Apollo spacesuits. Let me see if I can find some of the early ones. And I'm not talking about the ones they were using around Apollo 11. I'm talking about the ones that were used really early on. Like the actual flight suits. Let me put that in. Flight suits instead. For the earlier missions. Like these. These looked like a Star Trek prop. Rest in peace to these men here. They all three did die in Apollo 1 in an accident. But their uniforms, I just don't know. The early Apollo uniforms are kind of rough. Or really, honestly, the Mercury program uniforms, or the flight suits. Mercury flight suit. Here we go. Yeah, now this is taking the cake.
Yeah, that is taking the cake, I will admit.
This is foil, man. He steals your tin foil at night from the kitchen. That's what he does. These suits were very rough. I do think these are the roughest. Also, someone said the Gemini flight suits. Let's see. Honestly, yeah, those are pretty much the Mercury ones. Kind of a little bit on the rougher side, but still, a big thanks to you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the last super chat from Gunfox.
And this one goes to Gunfox once again. He said STS-37 is the 39th NASA Space Shuttle mission and the 8th flight of the Space Shuttle Atlantis. It was a 6-day mission with the primary objective of launching a Compton Gamma Ray Observatory, the CGRO.
Man, straight out of Compton. Like, man, but beyond that, I gotta say, the pictures from this mission, once again, really cool. Oh, look, they were able to see the Kuwaiti oil fires from above. That actually looks hellish, really.
That does look hellish, really. And it was hellish, too. Lost a lot of money.
Lost a lot of money. A lot of lives and money. But pretty interesting mission nonetheless. And I gotta say, a huge thanks to you for the support and sharing these STS missions with us. And thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Danny B yet again. It is Chef Danny, and he comes back in with another $50 support. And thank you very much, Danny, for that support indeed. He said, Chef Danny again. So my son got me some metal Earth models. And also, I know exactly what those are, Danny. Those are pretty cool. He said one is the B-17 Flying Fortress, and the other is the F-4U Corsair. And I don't really know anything about these aircrafts, but the models already pissed me off because I don't have the patience. That's why I've never gotten them, Danny, because I don't know if I have the patience for it either, to be honest with you. They look complex. But they're pretty cool looking, though, if you have the patience for it. But, Enforcer, what say you?
These are what you're talking about. They're these. And these are super cool. I think these are really neat. Like those are pretty cool. That's the Enterprise D and the original Enterprise. But beyond that, I would have to say,
fuck, I'm not a damn engineer. I'm a medical doctor.
Damn it, Spock! I'm a doctor. I'm not this stupid. But oh, wow. I love that one. That one is so cool. And this one up here in the top right, that is super cool looking. I like those. I like the brass era forwards. I thought they were neat. But beyond that, I'd have to say, a big thanks to you for support, Danny B. And I'd have to say, I don't have any of these either, and I haven't made one. Because I don't know. Like, I would like to make one day, but I just never have had the time or the chance, really, honestly. Did people paint these? Like, did they paint them, or did they come like this? Because there's one up
they
here.
Painted them, probably.
Yeah, because this is the one, and it's not, it doesn't look like this. because I guess it's not painted. This looks great, though. That looks great. I really like that. But beyond that, I do thank you for the support, Danny B. And I'd have to say that I probably wouldn't have the patience to make one of those, at least right now, either. Because I'm trying to think, eventually, at least some point years in the future, of making a model railway layout. And for now, it's still in the works, because I just don't have time to do anything really beyond this. But a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Terry Strife. And thank you very much, Terry, for that $20 support right there. I do not see a comment attached to it, but we thank you very much, Terry, for that $20 support and also helping to keep the channel running. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you for the support. You didn't throw in a comment, but we're massively appreciative. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have another one from Gunfox, and Gunfox puts in the fourth one right here. And a huge shout out to you, Gunfox, for those 4 super chats tonight. And he continues today's in space history. He says STS-40, the 11th launch of the Space Shuttle Columbia, was a 9-day mission in June 1991, and it carried the Space Lab module for the Space Lab Life Sciences 1, and the first dedicated solely to biology.
Oh, that's really interesting, actually. And I thank you once again for sharing that with us, Gunfox. And a huge thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because it is folks like you who have helped to make this thing possible and help us to keep making it possible year after year. So a massive thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to the alcoholist, puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support. He said, hello, Enforcers, and hello there, Mr. Alcoholist. He said, I've been a quiet viewer since late 2022. I've been enjoying your coverage very much. There's someone with the Hellraiser car driving by the front. They've got the loud exhausts shattering the windows in here. I tell you what, like shaking them at least. But back to the alcoholics, I'll restart that super chat, by the way. That rude individual there with that loud truck interrupting the whole thing. But the alcoholist said, hello, Enforcers. I've been a quiet viewer since late 2022, and I've been enjoying your coverage very much. And as a Ukrainian myself, I truly love seeing an apolitical news source with verifiable info for a Western audience in Slav Ukraine.
And thank you so much for enjoying that, because a lot of people who started off in this category have had to diversify in a way to keep relevant, because the war in Ukraine has generally not been getting as much attention as it used to in the public, or at least in their minds. And some of them have gotten really political, to the point that whenever they mention Ukraine, it is quite truly a domestic political topic instead of a foreign policy matter that's apolitical like it really is. And I gotta say, I thank you for appreciating that we have kept true to our source form from the start, and we keep everything apolitical, and we just keep to reporting the news and supporting the nation's best interests at heart on what we should be doing around the globe. And I've got to thank you greatly for appreciating that and for watching the channel for so long. You've been watching this thing for about 3 years now, and we're massively thankful for that. So a massive, humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat is going to go to Havlin Tuff, who puts in a 20, and thank you very much, Havlin, as well, for that support. And Havlin said, there have been over 10 major accidents with Soviet or Russian subs with the loss of life of some or all the crew, and I can only think of 2 U.S. submarines on eternal patrol after World War II, and the Russian submarine accidents aren't new, and also OGLSA.
Hey, and I thank you for support, and there's one that you're forgetting, and I think this is one of the only major ones we had after World War II, but it's that of the USS Thresher. This one actually suffered a catastrophic implosion after it uncontrollably went below its maximum test depth during sea trials, and it killed everyone on board. As you can see here, its fate, it was lost with all hands during a deep diving test on the 10th of April of 1963, and all 129 crew members went down with the sub when it imploded. This is the only disaster that I know of that happened after the Cold War by a U.S. submarine. But this, we don't really know what happened with it. There's been a lot of theories, but no one can reach the wreck because it's so deep. And also, but nobody knows what exactly happened on board the submarine leading up to the implosion. It just started to rapidly dive out of control. One of the last transmissions from the submarine suggested that they were trying to blow the tanks to try and conduct an uncontrolled ascent to just stop the dive. But nobody knows what happened. But this is one of the only disasters that happened after World War II. And there was also another one that happened beforehand, where a submarine, an experimental one, ended up conducting tests off of the coast of Massachusetts, and it ended up also going down to the bottom as well. But the entire crew of that one, I believe, was saved, which was a pretty impressive thing because they used a diving bell to save all of them. It was a really cool sort of an operation. But beyond that, I do thank you for the support, but this is the only other one that I can know of that actually did result in the loss of all hands. But a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also a big shout out to Brendan West, who put in a 20. And thank you very much, Brendan, for that support as well. He said, I love the update, guys. And also, I've seen that drone in Poland since the 24th of September. It seems newish to me. And also, take one from the chat.
And I thank you for sharing that with us, and I thank you for enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running. And we will make sure to get one from the chat in your honor. So what do we got, Matthew?
And the live chat question goes to AF Kaplan, who said, if the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant melts down and nuclear material contaminates a NATO country, would that be grounds for NATO to declare Article 5?
Technically not. It's not a direct armed attack. It's more so of a radiological incident, because if we had a justification to declare Article 5 as a result of that, we could have declared Article 5 because of the Chernobyl disaster, because of the radiation that was spread over NATO states during that period in time. But we didn't, because it would be really hard to justify such a provocation, considering that it's not a deliberate armed attack. But a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Knight of the Light 50, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support as well. And he said, the drone is still showing up south of Warsaw on flight radar. What's going on?
I wouldn't know. Some people are saying that it's been there for days, actually. So, unfortunately, I'd have to declare ignorance. I think it may just be some sort of a test by the flight radar system itself, but I also could be mistaken on that assumption. But a huge thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Eugene Haynes. And Eugene put in a 10. And thank you very much, good sir, as well. He said, diesel fumes can ignite, but it's not as straightforward as with gasoline. Diesel fuel has a higher flash point, around 125 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, or 52 degrees to 93 degrees Celsius. And it has a higher flash point than gasoline, meaning it requires more heat to ignite.
And I thank you for the support, and that is true, but there is no lack of hot running objects inside of a submarine that could ignite something like that. So that is true, but there is also a decent risk that it actually could explode as a result of the leak of the tanks. But a massive thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Roar Dakota, and Roar said, LSA, LSA, LSA.
Hey, and LSA, and a big thanks to you for the support. You've been helping us to keep this thing running, and I got to thank you massively once again, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling. So massive thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, a huge shout out to the Iconic Revolution, who just threw in a $20 support. And thank you as well very much for choosing to support the channel. They said, I've been watching for almost a year, and this is my first time interacting. And also, welcome to the live chat, by the way. They said, you guys have become a part of my nightly routine. And I really enjoy not only the format of the news, but also your point of view as well. And also, thank you for the kind words. And they said, well done, gents.
Hey, and thank you so much for the kind words, the Iconic Revolution. And I gotta thank you for watching for a year and really getting a lot out of this thing. It sounds like you've been enjoying it a great deal, and I gotta say that we love to hear that. We always love to know that folks are enjoying it, and I love to know that you are supporting this channel as a result of that, and helping us to keep this thing running so that way folks like you all around the world can continue to get a great deal of enjoyment out of our news format and also our points of view. Because our points of view are a little bit out there. Like, a lot of people don't say what we say, or a lot of people don't try and do what we do. We're kind of in a niche, to a sense. We're not hard left or hard right, or even left or right. We really just kind of run down the middle on this thing. And that's the way I like it, because we don't have to pretty much kowtow to anyone higher up in some political hierarchy, which is what a lot of other people have to do. And also on top of that, another thing is that some people don't know this, and this is something I find a little bit interesting, is that in our chat, or people who haven't generally have to have this experience, and I hope that a lot of people don't, but some people will say stuff like, you know, oh, only the right-wing people or the left-wing people are radical and dangerous and stuff, you know, as far as why they don't like politics or why they don't like a certain group. Me and Enforcer Matt, over the course of 3 years, have been called let's see, what was it? Originally, we were called right-wing MAGA Nazis for the first 3 years while Biden was president, because we would disagree with what some of the things that he was doing in foreign policy and say there was a better way to do it, or that was just the wrong action to take. So we would be called that. And so then we would have all of the left-wing lunatics come and threaten to kill us every day. And then when Trump became president and we started to criticize his foreign policy actions like we did with Biden, then a whole bunch of people from the right wing started to come out of the woodwork and also threaten to kill us and torch us and all that sort of stuff. And so that's one reason why I really don't get into politics, because it's not really a one-sided thing about one group of people is like a load of batty lunatics that are dangerous and the other people are righteous and well-intentioned. Honestly, a lot of those people are just straight up lunatics. And so I don't really like the idea of affiliating ourselves with one group of lunatics or the other, because at the end of the day, there's not really a lot of common sense in any of the arguments made, even by the reasonable people on both of those ends, and then they're just backed up by a mob of raving lunatics. So I generally am perfectly happy with us being the way we are and being kind of in a niche instead of falling within one of those other groups and doing what we do, because one, people really love it like you, and two, I think that's more so on brand for us, is not going down one path or the other. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I possibly can, and a massive thanks for you for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to No Please, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, No Please, for that $10 support. They said, realistically, where do you see the Russian-Ukraine conflict going? Because Russia's economy is in chaos, even with help from China, so a tipping point has to come in at some point.
I would have to say that the Russian economy is bound to collapse. There really is no way for anyone to save them. It would cost so much money to give them a bailout. Nobody would be able to finance the whole country of Russia getting a financial bailout. So Russia is bound to collapse. Nobody can save them at this point. Nobody can help them. Even if the Chinese wanted to help them, it's beyond their control. The wheels have no brakes on them. The brakes have burned out. Russia is rolling downhill into a crash at this point. And that's what I would have to say. I would like to give some more analysis on that, but it would be really deep, and it would pretty much just come back around to saying in short form, the Russian economy is bound to collapse, and there's really no way to save it. But a huge thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that the best I can. And a massive thanks for you for helping this channel to keep on running. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. And also, someone just said this in the chat. This is crazy. They said, it's a civil war, though. Like we're in a civil war right now in this country. You have drank the Kool-Aid to the extreme. I don't even know which side you're from, because I've been hearing that from both sides. But that's just extreme Kool-Aid drinking to the max there. The United States is not in a civil war, and the kind of violence that we're seeing right now is the same kind of violence that's been seen since the beginning of the country. So I'm not one to believe whatsoever that the country is falling apart or that's in a civil war. That's absolutely crazy. And as far as picking a side on that, I wouldn't pick a side anyways. It would be a shame to see the country rip itself apart. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Adam's Journal, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Adam, for that support as well. He said, the best news channel on YouTube, and hope to help get some good snacks while reporting.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. And hopefully, we will all be able to have good, delicious snacks. But a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a $10 support from Blind Man. And thank you very much, Blind Man, for that $10 support. He said, I just got off work at the news printing press hall and missed the first 90 minutes. And I have two questions. Did the Russian sub fail due to a flushed lavatory? And also any Bobcats today? And also, yeah, there were two Bobcats, actually. And he said, LLT, LSA.
That's a good one. Actually, funnily enough, that's a reference to a U-boat, I believe, that actually sank near Britain because one of the U-boat crew members actually flushed the toilet the wrong way, and so it just started a flood of seawater into the submarine, which resulted in it sinking and the death of a decent amount of the members on the crew. A little bit of a wild story, but that one didn't have a failure because of an incorrect toilet procedure. This one actually had a fuel line rupture or something along those lines that started to fill the cabin with just straight up diesel, so they had to emergency surface as a result. But I hope that does address it the best I can. Good reference, by the way. I like the historical reference there. But a massive thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is going to go to Andrew Honeycutt, who puts in a 10 as well. And thank you very much, Andrew, for that support. He said, drone warfare is the future. So are early detection warning systems in development, like what the Brits did during the Blitz. And Andrew and Matt, I got a run.
And I think
Oh, iron. He said iron. That's what he's saying right there. I get it now. I get it.
whoever must govern the Enforcer channel must have that iron in him. But beyond that, I do thank you for the support. And I'd have to say, Matthew, could you reread that first part of the question again?
Yeah, he said drone warfare is the beginning of this whole thing. It's the future, and so are early detection systems too. But also, it's kind of like what the Brits did during the Blitz.
I would have to generally agree with that. It really is the future of warfare, and hopefully we'll be able to get on the cutting edge of that, hopefully really quickly as well. And so with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Flash One, who's a longtime channel legend as well. And thank you very much, Flash, for that $20 support. He said, "Hello, Enforcers. Hello, LSA.
hello
And
there.
I'm just getting here again. And hey, Enforcer, do trains have load limits? Or do they just add another engine?" And great show by both of you.
That is a great question, Flash One, and the answer is that trains technically have no load limits, at least for the amount of cars that you can put on a train. Specific rail cars do have load limits, like different plate classifications, like a plate F car has a specific type of a load limit for that car, but as far as a train's length, it is quite truly limitless. It really is whatever the company wants it to be, and generally they have like an ideal length for the max economic ability, but generally you just smack another engine on that thing. So if you have, say, 150 cars, and they weigh several 100,000 tons all put together, and you're about to go over a route that has some mountains in it, so that would be like a 2% grade in some places on most tracks these days, you would generally just smack a whole bunch of engines on the front and back of that thing. The front ones are pulling, the back ones are helping to push it all up the hill, so taking a little bit of a strain out of the couplers and putting it more so on more force on the rear end, and they can get those things over those hills. So generally there isn't a load limit on how many cars you can put on a train. It really is just a matter of how many engines do you want to put on that train, and how often do you want to run a train. And that also that gets into the whole economics and business of railroading. But generally, there is no limit technically, and I think some trains in Australia have gotten up to nearly 4 miles long sometimes, as a result of there being really no load limit on how many cars you can put on a single train. But anyways. I hope that does address it the best I can. Also, Fan WP Dad said, "Is there a point where the knuckles fail?" Yeah, there actually is. There is a point where knuckles can fail, but you just you kind of fix that issue by putting distributed power units, which are called DPUs, into your train. So you put 4 engines at the front. You have like 50 cars. And then boom, there's just an engine in the middle of the train just sitting there. And it's connected through a remote system to the lead engine. So when there's throttle inputs put in up there, that one's also reacting as well, which really makes it more so 2 50-car long trains, because there's another 50 cars behind that distributed power unit. It's 2 50-car trains, but they're just coupled into one, and it takes a 2-man crew to run the whole thing instead of a 4-man crew to run 2 separate trains. So I hope that does address that well. But the logistics of railroading is a really interesting sort of a thing, but I hope that answers that question. That was actually a really good one. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Henry Mann, who puts in a 5. He actually puts in 2 of them, actually. And thank you very much, Henry, for that support. He said, "Another Russian Navy vessel disaster needing to be towed. Who's shocked? Not me. And also, given Soviet and Russian secrecy, it makes you wonder just how many of their vessels and sailors are at the bottom of the sea."
It really does, honestly. We know of a couple of failures that the Russians have had through the decades that were clearly marked by us because they were quite visible and noticeable by most measuring instruments at the time. But it really does make you wonder, how many naval disasters have the Russians had, and how often do they cover it up, and how many people died, unfortunately, as a result. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Torsten Hawk, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Torsten, as well, for that support. He said, "It seems like it's pretty easy to spot Russian submarines, but just keep an eye out for Russian tugboats." That's what I'm saying. That's literally what I'm saying, too. If you can spot the Russian tugboat, then nearby is some type of Russian naval vessel. It's either a submarine or a old clanky aircraft carrier that doesn't work, one or the other. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that you really, honestly, you just have to look out for tugs. You're right. Just look out for the tugs, and that tells you where the Russians are at. Exactly. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Alexander. And Alexander said the point really need to be made that this is a diesel-electric boat and not a nuclear sub.
That is true. That is true. And I thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one. But really quickly though, I do want to address some. I do thank you for the support, Moto Spartan. But at the same time, there you threw in your super chat. It's in a queue, and I'm assuming that it's probably like a $5 super chat or a $2 super chat. So it's a little bit of the ways down. We're not skipping your super chat. I don't know what's with people acting like that. We're not skipping your super chat. It's just that we have to make our way to it. And I cannot help that you want to be prioritized. Your super chat falls in the queue in a specific spot based off of how much it is. We work from the largest to the smallest. So you just have to be patient and wait for us to get there. But I don't really like how you're treating Enforcer Matt in your responses there. That's incredibly rude. And I would be entirely honest with you. If you think you're going to be rude like that, either to Enforcer Matt or me, we'd be fine if you didn't even watch the channel at all at that point. We're more than happy for you to enjoy the channel and watch it, but being rude to folks, whether it's us or anyone else, it's not really something we're too happy about at all. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Brian Gonzalez, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Brian, as well, for that support. He said, on the ZNPP, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, Zaporizhzhia is pressurized water reactor, not RBMK like the Chernobyl plant, and it also uses low enriched uranium. And if reactor is off, it's not going to melt down. That's actually not true, Brian. That's actually not true based on what I know and what I've read so far. I'm open to hear, alternative information about it. But at the same time, though, it appears to be, once again, a nuclear power plant uses radioactive fuel rods. That's something that's constant amongst pretty much all the power plants. You have to have radioactive fuel rods, or otherwise it's not a nuclear power plant. So those rods are by nature hot. They're emitting radiation, and it emits heat. So unless you have those being actively cooled off, even if the reactor's in a cold shutdown state, you could still have a partial nuclear meltdown, even with, the thing still being in there. So that's the way it works, at least according to what I know. But Enforcer, what say you?
Generally, that's how I would understand it as well. And regardless of how the reactor actually works or what specific type it is, they still generally have to keep coolant flowing through it because it still can lead to a meltdown. And that's why we're hearing that many Ukrainian officials, the IAEA, and multiple others are talking about this incident right now and making it into a really big deal, because if there is no coolant flowing through the reactor after a set period of time, that can result in catastrophic side effects. But a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, I see Moto crashed out. He crashed out hard. He got banned by Enforcer. He got a rare Enforcer ban.
I kept it as political as I could as well, like as calm as I could, not trying to, ruffle any feathers and just say, hey, look, man, you got to be a little bit more respectful here. But it looks like he wasn't having that. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
I'll tell you what, crashing out. I'll tell you what. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat here. This one goes to Adam Cortez, who puts in a 5. And Adam said, the enforcers are CIA. Also, we're not, by the way. He said, comprehensive, insightful, accurate. Oh, maybe those 3 attributes. Thank you for the kind words, by the way. He said, love from California. Congratulations on 500K. And here's to the next 500K in LLT, LSA.
And I gotta say, a huge thanks to you for the support. Thank you for the kind words. We are definitely not CIA. We are not affiliated with the CIA. We joke about that from time to time, but nah, we're not affiliated with CIA. We do have some decent rapport with folks who were in the CIA or may be in the CIA, but we're not affiliated with the CIA directly. But a huge thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Mike C, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Mike. He said, let's see. I don't know what this is right here. I feel like this is a setup, Mike. I don't know what this is getting us to say, to be honest with you. But thank you very much, Mike, for that 5. And we do appreciate that. We also have a 5 from the Playmaker 1271, who said, LLT, LSA. And random question, why does the LSA anthem sound oddly Soviet, especially with the singing? And is it a Leaf Spring Army or Lee Spring Army?
It's the Leaf Spring Army. And the reason why it sounds... I personally don't think it sounds Soviet. I actually think it kind of has a style of its own, which is might be a bit of a mix. Maybe could be described as a bit of a mix of like that Soviet style and an American style. But generally the way it came out was just the best way I could make it, because I sat down and wrote those lyrics, and it's the same stanza repeated twice, with the same stanza and chorus repeated for the anthem. But I wrote the lyrics to that. I actually wrote the original lyrics and then also composed it through an AI song generator, Suno AI. and I made, I think, something like 150 different versions of that song. I kept putting it into the Suno AI and just kept perfecting my prompt until I got exactly what I was looking for. Because I was, I wrote the lyrics and I was like, okay, how do I make this work? From beginnings bold to futures untold, the white and gold will forever unfurl. And I was trying to get it as close as I could to that. Eventually, it got pretty much right on the mark. Some things slightly different than what they were supposed to be from my original vision. But that was how the Lee Spring Army anthem came into being. And the lyrics, like, a lot of people really don't get to hear the lyrics well because the only version that we have with the chorus is the AI made one. But the orchestrated one, which plays at the beginning of the show every night, that's the instrumental version, and that one was actually composed by Marcos Barilari, who is a composer for Disney Pixar, and it was then played by Budapest Scoring in Budapest, Hungary, which is an orchestra that did the soundtrack for Squid Game, Die Hard, and a whole bunch of other movies. So that was the final version that we have, and I wish that we could get a choir, or at least a baritone opera singer to do the lyrics for the Lee Spring Anthem and then dub that over the actual instrumental that we have, because that would be sick. I would love to do that, but it costs a good deal of money to make a song. Like, if we're talking about the Armed Forces medley, it cost, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, $7,500 to make the Armed Forces medley, which was about 4 minutes long, and then it took about another $10,000 to make the rest of the intro, and a decent part of that isn't even played anymore because we shortened down the intro a good bit. So it wasn't cheap. It was not cheap at all. That's kind of what limits us from just doing that all the time, is that it's extremely expensive, and was like the magnum opus project of the channel, at least in terms of cost. It's the most expensive thing we've ever done. But that is how the Lee Spring Army anthem came into being. So it's generally more so my style of what I think sounds really good, and also Marcos Barilari, who was the composer who made the instrumental, did it really good because he had like the brass notes hit in the perfect spots that makes it sound really powerful and really cool. And I'm like, man, that was the perfect way to do it. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A humongous thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel a reality and be able to do cool things like that. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
Honestly, I feel like anything with medley in the name gets expensive quick. Like, whenever you go to the store and you, like, want to get that pre-prepared, like, fruit medley or something like that, like, it's always expensive as hell. Like, it's like $20 for, like, a little bucket of fruit that's already cut up and stuff like that. Also, your music medley is expensive. Like, I think the moral of the story is, be careful with medley. It's really a tricky thing, that word, that old-fashioned phrase, medley. You gotta be careful. Meddling in things is not good. They said they don't want a list of fruit. They said, we don't care what type of fruit came from the island. They don't care. They said, sir, what are the exports from the island? They said, terrible things, terrible things. I said, that's a nasty place. Nobody wants to hear about it. Amelia Earhart. That's what... But anyway, moving on from that, folks, and moving on to our next one here. This one's going to go to none other than Philip Harrison. And thank you very much, Philip, for that $20 support. He said, have only been listening for a couple of months, but I do enjoy your points of view on Ukraine's plight. Also, from the UK, so you can only listen and watch when not at work. LLT, LSA.
And long live the Lee Spring Army, Philip Harrison. And really cool to hear that you're from the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. What part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland are you from? That's something I'm interested in. But beyond that, I do thank you massively for the support. And I thank you for the kind words and enjoying our points of view. Because we try and put it out there in the way that we like to, where it's supporting Western and American interests and not just beneficial to Ukraine, but it's beneficial to us all. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I possibly can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, to answer a question from Danny B real quick, he said, I wonder why NATO's not saying the correct numbers about the aircraft they deployed. Generally, we've deduced the numbers of NATO aircraft that were deployed for the counter operation against Kaliningrad and the Russian deployments around NATO airspace by pretty much looking at Flight Radar 24. That's pretty much the way we compiled it, and that's the way the other OSINT analysts that we associate with also compiled that information as well. So there's been no official NATO statement about the exact number of deployments of their aircraft in the area, but it's over 11. Like, that's the general number we have. It's 11 plus NATO planes that were deployed. I don't think they're there all today. I think they might have, like, some of them might have left. Now, there's still some P-8s running around the area, P-8 Poseidon aircraft that are there surveilling the area, but I don't think it's the full deployment anymore. But Enforcer, what do you know?
Generally, from what I know, most of those aircraft have landed at this point and are no longer flying. But yesterday, we believe that the number could have been approximately somewhere between, I believe it was 55 or 54 to 70 aircraft that were in the air at a single given moment. That was our rough estimate.
NATO
So,
planes?
yes, that was including the tankers, the command, the surveillance aircraft, and all of the potential combat
Oh,
aircraft that could have been airborne as well.
okay, gotcha. I thought you were just listing off the surveillance aircraft. I was about to say I thought there was only like 11 of those, but I got you now. You're listing off the tankers and all the other ones too.
I think in terms of surveillance aircraft, we only had about four. There was the P-8, the RC-135, the Army targeting aircraft, and then the Gulfstream AWACS aircraft, the command aircraft that was airborne. And I think that would be our only command and surveillance aircraft that were airborne yesterday. And then we had 11 aerial tankers airborne yesterday. And then if we're counting those 11 tankers and assuming that they're having about 4 to 5 combat aircraft in tow each, that then adds another 44 to 55 combat aircraft that are in the air, along with those 11 tankers and the 4 reconnaissance and command aircraft. So all in total, it could be anywhere in between 57, actually, as a correction, aircraft in the air at a maximum minimum estimate, and then as a maximum estimate, it would be around 70. So I hope that addresses that well, at least the clarification as to the numbers there and how I got to them. But with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, real quick, Bobby also has a good question. Bobby43, he said, if the Russians allow the power plant to melt down the Zaporizhzhia plant, would that be the start of nuclear war? Honestly, I'll tell you this, Bobby. If the Russians, if it's provable, that's the big deal. The big crux of that would be, could NATO prove that Russia intentionally allowed the plant to melt down? If they could prove that, I would say that would definitely, with a 90% chance, be the start of a nuclear conflict, or at least a NATO conflict directly with Russia, because the radioactive contamination is going to affect Europe, including Russia itself. It's going to affect everybody. That's the largest power plant in Europe that would be going up and having a meltdown. So, me personally, I think it would start something, at least a conflict of some sort. It probably wouldn't initially start with a nuclear exchange, but it could get to that point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that if we, like with Matthew saying, prove that it was done with actual malice and intent to cause harm to NATO and the whole of Europe, we certainly would go to war over that. But it would be a little bit hard to prove that to some degree. Unless if it was clear and obvious and we could make that sort of an argument, most people in the West would get on board with that. But there is a possibility that we could go to war over that. It's just that, just on its face, it might not be possible to do that. But if we can clearly show malice, then we could. But a humongous thanks to you once again for the massive support that you've been throwing in through the course of the night, Bobby43, and I hope we addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we're about to be moving on to the next one. But before we do, Matthew, how many Super Chats do we have left?
We have about 10 left. And also, by the way, a big shout out to you, Bobby, for throwing in that 50 Canadian. He actually threw that in as a super chat after we asked a live chat question out of the live chat. So thank you very much, Bobby, for throwing in that 50 once again. And hopefully we addressed that question well.
And I hope we did. And also, a humongous thanks to you once again for that support, Bobby, because we were already answering that question by the time you threw in the super chat. But we were still massively appreciative for the support, because you're helping us to stay on air and keep asking and talking about those very interesting sorts of questions. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Crispy, who puts in the 5. And thank you, Crispy, as well, for helping to keep the channel running. And we do appreciate that very, very much. And we also have a 5 from Interstate Chef, who said, and also, by the way, I'm going to return back to Chase Matty's in just a second. I almost missed it there for a second. But this one from Interstate Chef is the $5 super chat, who said, quick question. The Golden Spike National Park is just northwest of Salt Lake City. And any way you can do a quick rundown of that? And why was it there? LSA.
Great question. The Golden Spike National Park, which is up here near Promontory, it's actually right here, is right here because at a point, the Transcontinental Railroad actually was united by the Golden Spike right here at this exact spot. And it actually, the Golden Spike was actually driven into a fake railroad tie that they set below the rails specifically for this event. And you can actually see that's recreated here. And also the Golden Spike was then immediately picked up and taken off right after the ceremony, which you can see in this picture, once again, right here. And you can also see that fake tie right there. and that was the one that was driven into. They actually connected a telegraph line to that spike, so that way when they struck it into the railroad tie, you could hear it across the whole country. So it was actually really cool because technically that was the first national event that was telegraphed or televised, whichever way you would like to put it, or broadcast live when it happened, was the sound of the railway hammer driving the spike into the railroad tie. A really cool fact about that. But beyond that, the Transcontinental Railroad actually did pass through here at once. And also, I gotta say, the engines from that era were beautiful. This was the brass era of the engine, and I've gotta say, the aesthetic has never been beat. Like, it was a beautiful time. But beyond that, later on, it was decided that the Transcontinental Railroad would actually be moved further south, down here to Promontory Point, instead of Promontory up here. And that's where the original Transcontinental Railroad was combined, but it had a bit of a winding route around the north part of the Salt Lake, so they decided later, let's just abandon that, rip it all up, and we'll move the whole Transcontinental Railroad about 14 or 15 miles south and build a giant wooden railway bridge across the Great Salt Lake. And let me see if I can show y'all the Great Salt Lake Railway Bridge that existed back then. It was actually a really cool feat of engineering, but it was a giant bridge, kind of like the old Lake Pontchartrain Bridge down to New Orleans. You can actually see it right here. This is from a great YouTube channel called It's History. They cover all kinds of interesting stuff from American history that's a little bit more obscure, but it was just a giant wooden railway bridge that crossed the whole Salt Lake. Later on, they actually changed it into a gravel berm, and that's what's there now. And it actually follows the route of the old bridge. You can actually see where the old bridge was right here and where the new route was made with the gravel berm. But that's why it's up there in Promontory, and it really isn't connected to anything else. And as a matter of fact, the National Park Service had to rebuild the little track of rail that they have in this area. Let me see if I can show it to y'all. Right here, it ends right there, and once you go down here a little bit, it also ends right down here, and there's an engine shop connected to keep the two historic engines, the replicas, safe and, you know, not getting rained on and exposed to the elements all day, every day, when they're not in service for some sort of a national park event. So they actually had to rebuild that little section in the exact spot that it was in at that time when the Golden Spike was driven in 1869, because the whole thing had been ripped up and moved 15 miles south. So I hope that explains to you why that's in this specific spot, and also why in the world the Transcontinental Railroad doesn't even go through here anymore. And also another thing, another interesting fact, the Transcontinental Railroad's always talked about, but they never tell y'all that multiple different railroads after the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific made the first Transcontinental, made their own. So there are actually several transcontinental railroads. There's the North Transcon, the Central Transcon, which is that one, the original transcontinental, and then I think there are two South Transcontinental railroads that go through the areas of California to Oklahoma and Texas generally. One of them was run by the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, and the other one, I believe, was run, if I'm not mistaken, by the Southern Pacific. But anyways, I hope that does address that the best I can, and a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and a really cool question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Ross Nib. And thank you very much, Ross, for that $20 support. He said, "Hey fellows, enjoying the news as always. I'm glad to hear it." And he said, "Crazy idea, but if our friends the Germans kicked off an insurgency in former East Prussia, might that change the vector of the current conflict?"
Probably not. There's not really any Germans left to support a uprising in former Königsberg, unfortunately, or East Prussia. So sadly, that wouldn't really make it anywhere. It's a cool idea, but there's just not enough Germans with German sentiments inside of former East Prussia to really kick that off. And also, for that reason, I don't really think it changed the trajectory of the war because there's just not a sympathetic population to use in that area at this point. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And also, with that, we are going to be moving on into the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, I see people talking about going to Chernobyl, by the way. Honestly, like, I'm not saying this as a joke. I would seriously like to go to Chernobyl one day. Like, I was wanting to do that before the war started, but it wasn't a real reality for me because obviously it costs a hell of a lot of money to get over there to Ukraine. And also, getting into Chernobyl is a little bit tricky. It's definitely tricky now because there's a war going on. It was even tricky before the war started because you had to get through the exclusion zone perimeter and you had to go through a bunch of screening and stuff like that. So it was tricky even then. But one day, I would like to go there and take a look at the place. Now, obviously, there's a couple couple places I would not go. I would not go to the basement where they have the fireman's equipment at. That's still extremely hot and radioactive. And I wouldn't want to go inside the actual area where the elephant's foot is either, or inside the reactor itself. Wouldn't want to go either one of those places. But I would love to go into the new containment structure itself, like the new large dome that was hit by the Russians a short while back. You can generally go in there for a short period of time and it's generally safe. And you can generally go about the entire area of Chernobyl now and it's pretty much safe, as long as you don't dig up the dirt in the red forest or do something stupid like the Russians did, which is go dig trenches in there. It's pretty dumb. But I'd like to see it. I think it'd be pretty fascinating.
Honestly, it would be really cool. It would be super cool to go see Chernobyl. Like, honestly, I would be with Enforcer Matt on that. I actually do want to go see the Chernobyl exclusion zone someday. And you know, folks, the radiation isn't even that bad there in most places. Like the radioactive dissipation that's been seen in the ecological reserve is actually at a much faster rate than they originally expected when they made the first projections back in the early 90s. So a really interesting sort of a thing. Actually, as a matter of fact, folks, they've been shrinking the ecological zone at least before, well, the radiological zone, at least right before the war in Ukraine. They actually opened up some of these areas down here back to agriculture and resettlement because the radiation had dissipated so quickly compared to what they originally expected.
Yeah, and also, by the way, I see people mocking what I said, generally safe. When I say generally safe, I mean like mainly on the main paths it's safe to go. Now, obviously, the way radiation works is it's not consistent everywhere you scan with a Geiger counter. If you go to certain spots in the Chernobyl exclusion zone, there are hot spots. And I think they have the hot spots marked with a sign, like typically speaking. Like, for example, the claw that the Soviets used to actually move debris, that is still a hot spot. And they have a sign around it that says, you know, don't stay near this claw very long because the longer you stand near a radioactive hotspot like that, the higher dose you get, which is where the real danger comes into play, is standing very close to something that's radioactive for a long period of time. That's where you actually get taken out by the radiation, or you get possibilities of cancer and things like that. So as long as you stay on like the main areas, because they have to have scientists that work here. There's scientists that work here all the time, and they're actually stationed there, and they know how to stay out of the bad areas. And generally, they can show you where those were. So I would personally like to see it. Like when the war is over, we should have an LSA meetup in a safe spot of the Chernobyl exclusion zone.
Man, honestly, man, I think you would love the Stalker Shadow Chernobyl game series. Like that would be up your alley, really. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here is going to go to none other than Chase Matty, who puts in a 15. And thank you very much, good sir. He said, it sounds like the Russians might regret taking the power plant because now it's more of a liability than a benefit at this point.
Possibly, or they might view it as some sort of a golden weapon that they can get away with using. Either way. But still, a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Tom Stoles. And Tom puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Tom, for that support as well and helping to keep the channel running. And Enforcer, what say you?
Hey, guys, thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because it is folks like you who have helped to make this thing possible and helps us to keep this thing running till this day. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to the Playmaker 1271, who puts in a 5. They said, where are our B-52s and B-2s currently stationed, and any chance that we see B-52s relocate to England? Forget nukes, they're JDAM or AGS or AGM or JASSM trucks.
As far as our B-52s, a large amount of our B-52 bombers are actually based out of Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana. You can actually see a large amount of them down there. And these are pretty much most of the remaining B-52s that we have in service. Almost all of them are based out of the Barksdale Air Force Base. As far as our B-2 bombers, they're actually based out of Whiteman Air Force Base inside of Missouri. And let me see if I can go and find, here we are, Whiteman Air Force Base right here. You can actually see all of the specialized hangars that we built to keep the B-2 spirits chilled and in a perfectly atmospherically controlled hangar, a lot like chilling and aging a fine wine, which these aircraft pretty much are the equivalent of that in air form. These are where these B-2 bombers are kept the most. Usually they were always kept here, but recently the current president seems to use them as a power projection symbol, a lot like an aircraft carrier, so these have been finding themselves traveling around the world a great deal. I think most of the 20 are still here at Whiteman, but I believe I heard recently that 2 B-2 spirits, one of them had taken off towards France, and I believe that another one is currently on a flight somewhere else. And when I mean a flight, it's sitting at a runway or an airfield somewhere else, but pretty much all of them are at Whiteman Air Force Base, and we generally have designed most B-2 operations to originate at Whiteman Air Force Base, fly to their target, conduct the operation, and then fly right back to Whiteman. Most other air bases do not have the extremely fleshed out and finely tuned facilities to maintain the B-2 Spirits long term. They can only conduct short-term operations, and also the longer a B-2 is kept in the open atmosphere, just sitting around, generally they start to degrade pretty quickly from what we know. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. Huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Jason Curling, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Jason, as well. He said, do you have a moving day for Utah? And yes, we do. Sadly, we can't say it on the air, though, for OPSEC reasons. He said, sure. And also, I need to know, is that you're going to be up for a week?
And I thank you for the support. We're going to announce that a lot closer to the day of, because we'll have to let you all know when the channel is going down. But for now, we're going to keep that a little bit of a operational security secret, so that way we don't have some, loony planning a month out on how to ambush us or something like that, But with that, I thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Kyle Padell, who puts in a 5. He said, take my money for the Equestrian Foundation and keep the horse face out, a.k.a. Lavrov.
That's a pretty good one. I got to thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. We will. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also a big shout out to Crispy, who put in a 5, along with Plazat, who put in a 3. And thank you both very much for that support. And we do appreciate that very, very much. And we also have a 5 from Tracy, who said, let's see here. Oh no, I'm not reading this off, but they said at the end though, say great coverage and better than any news out there.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. I see what you did there. You tried to get us, but you didn't. Better luck next time, though. One day you might actually get us. But still, thank you so much for enjoying our coverage, and thank you for the kind words. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts in a 2. He said, LSA hit the like button. That's an order.
And hit the like button, folks. That is an order. We've gotten up to 4,600 likes tonight, and hopefully we'll be going even higher than that. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to GLXWGNG, who puts in a 2, who said, I thought that was normal Russian air quality with the diesel in the air.
Honestly, it kind of is, but they still can't deal with it in contained spaces. So I guess that's a failing of the Russians. It's kind of like garlic. I mean, vampires can walk by a garlic field, but if you hang garlic up around your house, that's what freaks them out. Weird like that, I've had to deal with a lot of politicians that way. Whenever they call up asking me for campaign funds, I hold a piece of garlic near the phone, and they just hang up. It's like they can sense it. But anyways, a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $2 support from JC NorCal American Bullies. American Bullies? Oh, no. But thank you very much for that $2 support, by the way. He said, first time here, new subscriber, and great show input.
Hey, and thank you so much for the kind words and the support. And thank you for enjoying the Enforcers show. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to 1984 Bald Man, who puts in a 2. Thank you very much, good sir, for that support. He said, unless said steam train can fly and time travel.
I mean, honestly, I just like them because they're neat, like they're pretty cool. Like, they boil water into a high steam pressure, and then they push that through a cylinder, which turns the wheels. It's a really interesting sort of a system. Honestly, it's just so cool because it still is around today in a different form, but we still use it every single day. Everyone does to a degree, or at least some byproduct of its use. And it was the first real mechanized engine that we ever made that could move. And that's really cool when you think about it, because, think about it, folks. Airplanes are fairly recent. Cars and automobiles are an incredibly recent thing, and every other object that moved before that either had to move with the winds at sea with sails, or they had to be moved by beasts of burden like horses and ox. And the steam engine, the steam locomotive, was the first ever thing that we made that could move mechanically without any input by a living beast or a person. And it did that on its own with really no competitors for about 90 straight years, which is a really interesting sort of a thing about steam engines. And that's what's really fascinating to them to me, is that not only were they the first mechanized form of motion that we ever made, but they still are relevant today because we use steam turbines to create all of our electricity for the larger part. So a really cool sort of a sort of an invention. Honestly, I think if we were to ever say who was the most influential person or inventor of the modern age, I actually would say that it would be James Watt with the invention of the steam engine, because he was generally the guy who was behind the original inception of the steam engine as a working system, rather than it being like a vacuum engine or anything like that, which came before the steam engine. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, actually, it was an atmospheric engine. It wasn't a vacuum engine. It was an atmospheric engine, but it worked off of creating a vacuum. But that's a whole other thing for a whole other time. But a big thanks to you so
Also,
much.
by the way, I hate to break it to you. But he said that was a Back to the Future reference.
Oh, it's that Wild West one. Marty, we've got to get the steam engine up to 65 miles an hour. And like, honestly, you know what? I absolutely completely forgot that was a Back to the Future thing. Like, I know what you're talking about now, and now I feel goofy. but still, a big thanks to you for the support. And now I get to say, that's a pretty good one. That's a pretty good one. But actually, thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Bruce Lee, who puts in it too. He said, look at Gainesville, Midland, number 208, Winder, Georgia.
Gainesville? Is that where people are, like, getting, like, a swole? Like, they're, like, protein and whey? Also, Matthew, they said Gainesville and then what?
Gainesville, Midland.
Gainesville, Midland. Oh? Oh, look. I see what this is. This is a walking path made off of the old railroad that used to run through here. You can literally see that. Look at that. That's crazy right there. That's absolutely crazy. And there was a Y right here. And so I'm guessing that there was a depot around here somewhere. Maybe. Maybe. But holy moly. It's a decapod. That's actually really cool. That's really neat.
That's what they call these old steam trains, a decapod. Oh!
I guess you could call them a decapod because they had 10 legs and didn't get anywhere. Oh! But that is really...
I guess you could say this is the fastest way to move merchandise across the country. Oh! Oh!
Damn, bro, that last part sounded like he was wearing out. Like he was done with it all. He went, oh. I was like, bro, rest in peace. Goodness. It's a decapod, though. That's actually really cool. You know, we actually have something like that here in Birmingham. If you can make it downtown without getting shot, you can find it. It's this one right here. It's a Frisco from the St. Louis and San Francisco Railway, but it's a Frisco Mikado, spelled M-I-K-A-D-O, which is a Mikado, or what they called, I think they called it a MacArthur, because Mikado had a Japanese inference. Oh man! But it's a 282 wheel configuration. And this is, I think, one of the only two surviving examples of a MacArthur engine, or generally what's called a Mikado, in the country. And there has been some talks, although there seems to be a sapling growing on the side of this thing, that they'll eventually restore it and bring it back to running as a preserved steam engine. I would hope that they would. I think that everything should be preserved if there's a possibility behind it. But that decapod is really unique too. That's actually really cool. And also someone said it was a 280. No, it wasn't. It had 5. It had 5 running wheels. Let me go back down there to that thing. Let me show you. Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A 280 would be a consolidation, which would be a 280. This is a 210. And a 210, if I'm not mistaken, is a decapod. And let's see. The 210 is a decapod. So I did get that correct. It is, in fact, a decapod. As you can see right here, here's another decapod of the Penzi. Or any other decapods for that matter, like this decapod of the Seaboard Airline Railroad. which had nothing to do with planes. You would think that it would. It's called an airline, but that just actually meant that the track ran kind of straight, so, like kind of like in a straight line. So they called it an airline because that was kind of like an old-fashioned term for saying the thing went in a straight line. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. But that thing ain't no 280. I can count axles. It's a 210, which is a decapod. But anyways, a huge thanks to you so much once again for support and sharing that with us. It's really cool that y'all have one of those in Georgia. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that, folks, we are actually fresh out of Super Chat questions. But thank you all once again for helping to support the channel tonight. And we do appreciate every single one of you very much for helping to keep it running. And it's now time to get some live chat questions and our Morse code decoders of the stream. And tonight, we had the whole house. We had the whole roster. Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Errol Garbo, Her Royal Fluffiness, Kush, Copioteryx, and Sire. And thank you all very much for decoding this for us. They said, the LSA Morse code decipher says, Kilo Submarine seem to have a great deal of failures. Just ask the cartel about it. And LLT LSA.
All right, everyone. It's time for a court martial. Like but
Spock.
Damn it, Jim! I'm a news reporter, not a comedian. Beyond that. That's the sound of money. Y'all hit the jackpot. That's dead on the nail. Y'all get the Morse code message of the night. Yeah, I gotta congratulate y'all greatly for getting that correct. They might have gotten a little trombone there at the end. Oh, man, I'm telling you. I get no respect around here. I shouldn't put all this time and effort into making a shitty Morse code message for my co-host to say put a womp womp on me. Oh, man, I'm telling you. Oh, man, I'm telling you. I get no respect around here. Oh, man. Oh, man, he's doing it again. Oh, man, I'm telling you. Oh, man, it's a terrible life to live. It's a terrible life. Oh, man. Yeah, oh, man, I'm telling you. When I get off air, I sit there and say, oh, man, there was a lot of airtime, and he tells me I'm an airhead. Oh, man, I'm telling you. I get no respect around here. It's a terrible thing. Oh, man. But beyond that, y'all did get that correct, and I got to congratulate the Least Spring Army Signal Corps for getting that correct time and time again. Really impressive stuff. But, as we all say around here, oh, man, I get no respect around here. But anyways, we are going to be moving on into the live chat segment of the night. But folks,
also, by the way,
go ahead.
Also, by the way, a big shout out to Crispy, who put in a $5 super chat, by the way. I want to give them a shout out real quick. When I saw that right there in the chat, they put in the Lemon Creature, fist bumping Kirby. I'm not sure who that is there, but they're fist bumping somebody, or that could be Assault.
The Lemon Man's
sure
fist bumping a
The
lie.
Lemon Man.
Call
Man,
that.
he said life sour right now. It's lemons. I'm not about to make the lemonade. I'm just going to assault Kirby.
Man, we gonna beat Green Kirby to death, man. Like honestly, you call out the cops. That thing is conducting assault. But nevertheless, a big thanks to you for support, Crispy, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I gotta say that it's a wonderful thing to know that folks like you help us to keep this thing running. So a massive thanks to you once again. And great Southwest trains through in a 5. And Matthew, you're getting payback for them womp womps. Like, because great Southwest train said, good stream enforcers, I've chosen my name after the Great Southwest Railroad. I'm guessing by your profile picture, that has to be the Union Pacific, which, I mean, like, that's not a bad one. Or the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe. Or the Southern Pacific. Or all the other ones that were within that area. Although those were kind of like the biggest ones. But still, I mean, that is actually pretty cool. And I got to say, I thank you for the support, Great Southwest Trains. And that is a really neat thing to hear about. I personally am a huge fan of the Louisville and Nashville, which is kind of like my favorite historical railroad, but my favorite modern railroad is the Norfolk Southern, because they have a good paint job, and they're nearby. Like, so I'm a big fan of them because we get to see them all the time. Or you can be like that one guy who was on that video who's like famous, where he was like, Penn Central, wait 50 years, like all that stuff. But anyways, a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Andrew Honeycutt, by the way. Andrew Honeycutt put in a 2, and he said critical thinking is a true national deficit.
I'd have to say that's really a global deficit, actually, but I would agree it is also a national deficit, which should be faced. Education is a pillar of a democracy, a very important one, and people have got to take some time and effort to educate themselves. But a huge thanks to you so much for the support. I hope that does address that well. And also, we have another one as well that just came in, a 5 from Christian. And Christian said, do you expect a U.S. carrier strike group close to Poland in the future? LSA squad. And we ain't reading that middle part. That's taking a totally different connotation these days. We ain't reading that. But big thanks to you for the support. And I'd have to say, I would doubt it. If we ever saw a carrier group in the area, they're most likely going to be based out of the North Sea to give them some latitude to get the hell out of Dodge. Because passing through the straits around Copenhagen is a fairly slow and lengthy process. And if we're in a shooting war with the Russians, we really don't want to be stuck in like a fishbowl for the large part with a carrier. But I do thank you for the support, and I hope that does address that well. So in a sense, yes, but not directly on Poland's coast. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that quite well. And with that, it's time for us to get on into the live chats. We are not running out of time tonight, folks, but Enforcer Matt and me are fatiguing from the amount of work that we have been putting into the channel lately, and also for some reason I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. So we're going to be getting 5 live chat questions, and then we're going to be rounding out the stream for the night. So we are on to the 5th to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Sunflower Gal, who said Ukraine should attack their sub while above water if they can. Is that a good idea, you think?
I think it would be a great idea. It's just that I don't know if the Ukrainians can fly a drone that distance to hit that sub. It's a good bit of ways away from Ukraine. Even from its most southwesterly area, it's about 1,600 miles away, so might be generally out of reach. But it would be a nice idea if they could. And so with that, we are on to the 4th to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Rote, who said, can we have an explanation as to why the coolant system isn't using current from the plant? And to operate the cooling off the reactor, it makes no sense.
And that is a great question, and I think the only way that I can describe that is that the power plant, to create any current, its reactors have to be on. For the reactors to be on, they're generating steam, and that steam would be run through the steam turbines. If the reactors are off, as they are right now, due to safety reasons, the steam is not being produced in the reactor to spin the turbines to create any electricity on their grid to run the reactors with. So it has to be connected to the grid to be able to keep the cooling pumps working, and that's something that they don't have at the moment. So that's generally why that's the case, at least from what I would understand right now, but I may also be mistaken, because while I would say that I know an okay bit about nuclear reactors, it's nowhere close to even being a well-refined or well-sourced knowledge on nuclear technology. But that would be my best answer for it. But I hope that does address that well. And we actually have a couple of more super chats to address, including a 5 from Robert Newton. And Robert Newton said, thank y'all for your work, praying for peace like a pageant contestant from the movie Miss Congeniality. Feel better soon. And a big thanks to you for the support. And hopefully, we will be feeling better. We will be feeling better soon. And so, we also have a 20 from Ross Nib, a 20 Australian from Ross Nib, and he said, get well soon. Here's some dollars for chicken soup. And a big thanks to you for the support. And we will hopefully get some good chicken soup. And also, we have a 2 from...
So that's my job, by the way. That's my job. But the Silence also puts in a 2 as well. And thank you very much, Silence, as well, for that support. Also, a shout out to Ross Nib as well for throwing that 20 Australian. And Silence said, look up the Yorick Hunt, Ukrainian soldier from Azov unit.
Yorick Hunt. And a big thanks to you for the support. And let's see... Azov unit. And I'm trying to see if I can find them. And unfortunately, I can't. I think that would take a deeper search for an individual. But thanks for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we are on to the next one.
And also a shout out to Tiago Debortoli for also putting in a 2 as well. And we appreciate that very much, Tiago. And also, just making sure I got all of them here. Tiago, Robert, and also Ross, and also Silence put in one there. So a big shout out to all 4 of y'all for that support right there. And we do appreciate that very, very much. And also, they say you got duped. Let's see. Oh my God, Silence! Why the hell did you do that? Like, why the hell did you do that? Somebody, yeah, everybody's understanding what the hell that meant now. That's a doozy right there, honestly, Silence. I can't believe that you've betrayed us. But anyways, with that, we are now moving on to our live chat questions here, and this one goes to AF Kaplan. He said, in regards to the ZNPP, what are the biggest challenges to Ukraine getting the facility back under their control?
Generally, the Russians just relinquishing it. That's really the biggest problem or hurdle that they've never been able to overcome at this point, is that the Russians just absolutely refuse to give it back to Ukraine. So that would be my answer. And until the Russians are willing to give it up, the Ukrainians would have to take it back by force, which could be somewhat dangerous considering they would be fighting on a nuclear power plant. And so with that, I hope that does address the best I can. And we are on to the 3rd to last question of the night.
And this is actually going to be our second to last question of the night because we're running out of questions. But this one goes to Carrion Crew, who said, does Europe need to worry about prevailing winds from Chernobyl if Russia decides to drop a tactical nuclear weapon on the old structure?
Technically, yes, to a degree. We would have to worry about that to some extent. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is likely the last person to put in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Tiago De Bortoli, who put in a $5 donation yet again. And thank you very much, Tiago. They said, can American companies privately fund the drone problem and be waived in wartime to meet defense requirements and standards?
Technically, yes, but the hurdles that they've set up for a defense company to operate at all is actually incredibly strenuous. So conducting any sort of drone development that would pertain to wartime operations would be fairly difficult without making it through all of those hurdles. So in a sense, that should be possible, but legally, through all of the hurdles that you have to jump, it really is no in the long run. But a big thanks to you for the support, and I hope that does address that well. And also, Matthew, let's get that final live chat question tonight so we're not rounding this thing out on a super chat.
So this one goes to Triberium, who said, as far as I remember, the only power station even connected with this nuclear power plant was in Ukraine, and did Russia hit that power plant cutting off the power to maintain the nuke one?
I don't think that they did. I think that that one's still operational, and generally, if the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant was connected to another power plant on the Ukrainian grid, it technically would be connected to all of them to some extent. But still, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, folks, we've reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank each and every one of y'all so much for watching tonight. We've been entirely honored to have you all here, as we had a peak viewership of 16.6 thousand people here, and over the course of the stream we've had 130,000 people watch it. We're entirely honored and greatly appreciative to have had each and every single one of y'all here, and we hope that y'all enjoyed this channel massively. If you did, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We're incredibly close, as a matter of fact, of hitting 509,000 subscribers. We are growing massively every day this week, and hopefully y'all will join us as we continue to cover this news day in and day out of all of the significant developments from around the world. And we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world, and we will also be running our Sunday fundraiser on that nightly stream tomorrow, and if there is enough news to cover, I will also be the one making the short war summary for that day. So we will see you all then. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Granny, Haram Slava, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, thank you all once again for joining us yet again tonight on another day of the War News stream. And be sure to join the Enforcer tomorrow as well, midday, for that short war video. And join us again tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern for our next nightly War News stream. But with that, folks, we appreciate all 130,000 plus people that joined us by the very end of the stream. And once again, we will see you all tomorrow. And with that, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.